How are you? Hi, everybody. Happy New Year's Eve. Oh my God, I'm so excited to see you guys. I'm so excited to be here. I'm glad you guys are here. Let's see. We got Mrs. King of Anything, Tracy. Profess is giving us forgiveness. Thank you, Profess. We all need a little forgiveness going into the whole new year. A little bit of Lisa. Hey, girl. Hey. How are you? Hello, my true crime lovelies. It's been a year. It's been a year. We're on our way out. First of all, can you guys hear me? We might be doing a little ASMR because the little one is asleep and we're trying to keep him that way. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Oh my goodness. I was of two minds, and the one we're going with is the recap of the Sarah videos. For those of you guys who joined me earlier and had that recommendation, thank you. Thank you very much. It was either that or I had five other videos, which I guess I'll do for tomorrow. There's five cases that I followed that I want to cover their sentencing. But I was like, it's a lot of new, because you and I haven't talked about it. So it's a lot of like new stuff. And I just kind of wanted to chill, like going into the new year. So I want to talk about Sarah. I want to check in with you guys and see how you all are doing. Okay, I see a lot of ones. Yay. I can hear myself today, which I think is a good sign. I'm back on my other laptop. I think I figured it out, but I don't want to get too cocky. It is a work in progress. This streaming thing, it's definitely a work in progress. Okay, so what are you sipping on? I've got some Diet Coke. I have it in a plastic cup because I've said this before. I have all glass cups, like for the house, and he's broken two of them. So I have been collecting fast food. It's really bad. I need to stop drinking Diet Coke. But that's what I'm doing, and I've got some sparkling apple cider. I was gonna drink it with sugar bear earlier, but he was a little grouchy, so I was like, let me just get him to sleep. So we'll have sparkling apple cider tomorrow, and hopefully that will go well. Okay, so the first thing I have is the cross examination, and then as I was sitting here, I was like, oh, I wonder if I should have done openings too, but I'm gonna skip the opening because I feel like I don't know. I'm just gonna skip it, and we'll start with the cross examination of Sarah, if that's all right. Muffled, JPC. I'm coming in muffled. Okay, how about now? Is that clearer? Am I still muffled? Let me try to adjust the gain. You guys, let me know. Is that less muffled? It might be me and not the microphone specifically. Is that less muffled? I also have to have it in the right position. Okay, hopefully you guys. Wait, what? Bras are fashioned into a harness to wear their toy. This is just a heads up because a few times you speculated she was using the stolen gloves to make dental dams. I did speculate on that because it was not just stolen gloves, they recovered cut up pieces of stolen gloves. So that made me think that she was using it as a dental dam. But bras into harnesses for the toy. What are they making for the toy? They're making the gloves also, like cutting off the. I've missed something. They're cutting off the fingers. Okay. With the stolen gloves. She also had multiple straps and other stuff. Okay, so you're saying she cut off the fingers. All right, fair enough. I think she also cut off the fingers and unfolded them. I think they were doing both. But you know, who am I? Like, girl, get it in. All the things that they think of in prison. Yes. Yikes. Well, I think that sets the tone. All right. Are we ready to get in? Is anybody opposed to us going straight into the cross where I just want to give Mr. J his props, the snark, because I think everybody was waiting for this, like, aha, I got your moment, and that didn't happen. I loved the cross because he had so much in his back pocket, you know? He had all the rebuttal videos. So yeah, but he also kind of teased out stuff, and he wasn't afraid to like have hang time, like just let his words hang in the air and not feel like the need to rush to the next thing or to comfort Sarah. He was okay, sitting in that uncomfortableness, and I think that's a skill. I think that's a skill because you're going on instinct. pure gut. Like, is it long enough? Is it not long enough? You know what I mean? Okay. I see no. Got two screens here. I see no protest to starting with our cross of Miss Boone, so I'm gonna kick that off. And uh, yeah, that's where we'll start this roller coaster ride for tonight. This was 9 hours of testimony. We will not be watching 9 hours of it. Cross comes in at 8:12:10, so I have it queued up there. Let me make sure this sound is turned up nice and loud. Hopefully I am not muffled. If I'm sounding muffled or you see I move a certain way, let me know, because we're going to have a good time tonight.
Any cross-examination?
Did George know somebody named Crystal? Did you ever mention Crystal in your text messages about being one of his bitches?
Don't know. I don't remember.
How about Christine? Did George know a Christine?
I don't know.
How about a Pamela Erickson?
These may have been people that he was communicating with on whatever the platform was.
On your phone?
I believe so, yes.
And did you find these communications?
I believe I found one or two of them from some of them.
And did you send a long letter to his family to relay to him about George and his girls that he was cheating on you with?
I believe so.
Okay, so you do know those names, right?
I don't remember them. It's been however long.
Okay. Now, on February 24th, 2020, you called 911 at about 1 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And at that point, you were still feeling a little intoxicated.
Oh my God, you guys in the chat. Now I want to know, what are they stuffing the gloves with? Is it? It's not really sausage, right? A little bit of Lisa said, watch out if they order. Please tell me they're not putting that in there. Somebody, please. Seriously.
Intoxicated, were you not?
It was more shock, yes.
So you agree that you previously stated, I was still, I believe, intoxicated to a degree?
To a degree, yes.
Okay. So 1 p.m., it's about 14 hours after 11 p.m. the night before, correct?
I'm guessing so.
Right. Well, 12 hours prior would be 1 a.m., and then 12 a.m. is 13 hours.
You see how he's holding her accountable? She's like, I'm guessing so. No, well then let's count. Let's not guess. Let's be super specific when it matters.
11 p.m. is 14 hours, correct?
Okay.
And you were present here for the medical examiner, Dr. Zadovich, to testify, correct?
Yes.
And you heard her talk about all the effects of ethanol that it has on the human body, correct?
Yes.
And she also mentioned something that it, on average, dissipates at about 0.015 an hour. Do you recall that?
I believe so.
Okay.
Blowing my mind, Tracy.
So, would it be fair to say that if you're still feeling the effects of the alcohol at 1 p.m., so that's 14 hours, 0.015, you were at approximately about a 0.21 at 11 p.m. the night before. Do you feel like you were 2.5 times the legal limit at that time?
I don't know how you came to that number.
Judge, I'm going to object.
Math.
Approach.
Ma'am, he did some math. If you're a straight A student, they're going to go approach and argue. She doesn't want to follow. Like, she just is determined to disagree with Mr. J. Like, ma'am, at least 10 hours you were asleep. At least. Depending on when you actually fell asleep. Oh, Helen, Happy New Year. God bless you, too. Decaf, coffee lover that I am. Oh, that sounds yummy, too. Math was not one of her. Yeah. Numbers. All the numbery thingies. Some of the things is just, like, pedantic for no reason. Like, why why have this hang up about this time? Now the jurors are just sitting over there thinking about it. She was asleep for a long time for somebody who was afraid for their life. Like, why didn't she, as soon as the sun come up, get out of that house with that man? If she really still thought he was alive.
You may proceed.
So you testified earlier that you all had about half of one of these bottles left from the night before, correct?
Happy
Yes.
New Year, Bama. So it seems like defense won that objection. We've moved on from the time, but I feel like even though they won it, I still feel like it was a dangerous move because if I'm on the jury, I'm sitting there thinking, damn, that was a long time that she was asleep. You know what I mean? Even if we didn't get back to the calculation, the jury can do math. All right, just Melissa, Diet Pepsi in the
And
house.
so would you agree that this is one of the 3 bottles that was purchased between February 22nd and the 2 that were purchased on February 23rd, 2020?
I'm guessing
Okay.
it is like the bottle, yes.
All right. And
It's the exact
1.5
bottle,
liters.
ma'am.
Would you agree?
He's looking for something here. I'm not sure what, though. Anybody know?
And when you say half, are we talking about the top of the label was left from the day before?
Oh goodness, no.
All right, a little less, halfway through the label?
It's too right about.
Okay, about halfway through the label. So in addition to
Which is what he said the
halfway
first time.
through the label, which you began consuming after going to public.
Welcome,
at about
Donna.
12:15, correct?
Thank you for becoming a
So
member.
you all would have began consuming around 12:30, is it fair to say, when you got back?
Thank you, Grandma Green Eye.
I can't tell exactly.
Okay. And after finishing what you all had left over from Saturday, the 2 of you consumed 2 1.5 liter bottles, correct?
I'm not sure about the second bottle that he purchased, if it was empty or not at the time.
Well, you did mention that the police would find 2 empty bottles in the top of your trash, correct?
Yes.
And we did all see that in the photographs, correct?
See that they
Two.
were in the garbage, yes.
All right, and you say you were about 100 pounds at the time?
Yes.
And we all know Mr. Torres was.
That's a good point, Ben. Actually, he may have been looking for that so he could go through the calculation with her, right? Because he went back to the amount and then he was going to do the percentage and he probably could not find the percentage. That's a good point. I think you're right.
Was 103 pounds at the time of his death, correct?
That's what he said.
All right, so that's 3 liters of wine between 200 pounds split between 2 people over the course of a day, correct?
Yes.
And you testified today that you were intoxicated at the time that this occurred, the videos between 11 and 11:30 at night, correct?
Yes, at some level, yes.
All right. Now, what does that mean to you? Previously, have you indicated that that means the room is spinning? Do you ever recall saying that?
I do.
So what was your level of intoxication at this point in time when the first video was filmed at 11:12 p.m.?
Do you mean from lack of sleep or alcohol?
From the alcohol.
Have you guys ever had any lack of sleep that made you intoxicated or is it just me? I feel like his question was super clear. What was her level of intoxication? And she's like, do you mean from lack of sleep? Ma'am, huh? Say what now?
What was my level?
What were you feeling? Did you have trouble with your balance?
I was more tired than anything.
Did you have trouble with your balance?
I don't believe so.
So you were able to flip a suitcase over with a 100-pound man in it, right?
Yes, it happened,
Okay. How about your speech? Do you feel like your speech was slurred?
clearly.
How about your inhibitions? Do you feel like you were doing things that you wouldn't do when you were sober?
I wasn't thinking about that.
Well, on reflection, do you feel like this is something you would have done when you were sober?
I didn't know me and George.
I'm
Thank
just
you,
asking you,
Sophia.
looking back on this, when he's in the suitcase and you're telling him how you feel, and then you wait 11 minutes and you film another 22 seconds, and then you go upstairs, upon reflection, is that?
So this one is interesting, Ben. This one, on George's medical, on the ME report, medical examiner's report, he's 100 pounds. Or 103, I'm sorry. In the preliminary, he's 100 pounds. In the final, he's 103. And it says he was well nourished. We were talking about. Oh, sorry. Oh my God. I have the screen. So we were talking about this. So in his final autopsy report, he was 103 pounds. In the preliminary, he was 100 pounds. I don't think Sarah was 100 pounds. I mean, just looking at the objectively, she was slightly larger than George, like meat on her bones wise. And then it says he was well nourished on the medical examiner's report. So we were talking about that the other night, Ben. Like, is it how he didn't look well nourished like in those videos, but that's what the medical examiner. So he wasn't classified as emaciated, even though for me, a man that looks that thin is alarming. I mean, I guess a woman too. I shouldn't make it a man, but you know what I mean. Generally, I'm not trying to be sexist. Generally, men have more body mass. So it is. I would question the malnourishment, but the doctor is the one who said that. So whatever nutrients he needed, I guess. I question it though, but it is how it was reported. Oh, I got a dog by my leg.
That's something you would have done and left him in there had you not been drinking?
I don't know. I can't say.
Okay.
If I was scared, then it would be something.
Okay. All right. Now, today you testified about the time frame between the two videos, correct?
Yes.
So you came down from the shower where you were hiding, correct?
Yes.
And as you're coming down the stairs, before you even get to the bottom of the stairs, you can kind of see over your shoulder or towards your right that he's trying to hide in the suitcase, correct?
Yes.
And the lid is down, but it's not closed, and you can tell he's hiding in there. It's not a great hiding spot just yet, right?
Correct.
And so you come over to him, and you're laughing, right?
Yes.
And you move the suitcase around some before zipping it shut, right?
No.
No? You immediately zip it shut?
Yes.
Okay. And you're both still laughing about it, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then it's during this course of time, how quickly is it after you zip it shut that you begin filming the first video?
I don't know without watching it. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, the video's not going to catch you zipping him up because you're like 10 feet away, right? How quickly after you zip him up is it before the video starts, is my question.
I don't know.
Okay. And then during that 9 minutes and 14 seconds is when he begins to get angry, correct?
What 9 minutes?
Between the two videos, there's 9 minutes and 14 seconds between the end of 1061 and the beginning of 1062 and 1063. So you got the 2 minute, 3 second video that starts at 11:12:45, correct?
I guess.
Permission to use state 17?
You may.
Not her handsome face. Oh my God. These hard swallowing and doing that little twitchy thing. She's not in a good headspace. Oh my god. Thank you. Is the chicken head PK? Oh my gosh, Neely. Happy New Year. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you.
All right, so we're looking at entry 31107. That indicates, according to the phone extraction, 2/23/2020, 11/12, 45 p.m. Image.
Do you see, like, for her to claim to be so intelligent, she's fallen into the trap again. Instead of just agreeing to X amount of time, right? Obviously, we know there's time between the two videos. She's now playing dumb, and so he gets to drag it out more. That means we're just going to be talking about these videos longer, and now we're going to be emphasizing, making it more important, the 8 minutes. Why not just say, okay, I logically, I don't understand where she's going, and maybe she isn't going anywhere, but
H_1062 movie begins being captured. And we've seen that that is about 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Entry 31113 indicates that image_1063.move disconnected.
said power is disconnected. There's also a bit of, I don't know, she's like cognitive dissonance on fleek. It's a case study. Like, they should show these in schools when they're explaining to you what it is. You know what I mean? Like, if you're having a hard time imagining. And what is that other thing? The Dunning-Kruger effect or whatever? Like, she's a poster child. Right? She excels at everything.
31113. A second movie is captured at 11:23:03 p.m. Your testimony was that after that first video was captured by your phone and you, Mr. Torres began getting angry and trying to push his way out, correct?
Say it one more time, please.
Between these two movies, of which there's about 9 minutes and 14 seconds, Mr. Torres begins to get angry and try and push his way out and get out of the suitcase, correct?
He had been angry on and off throughout the entire day.
Okay. You didn't tell us that earlier. You said it was a wonderful, fun day all day, correct?
That's because I lived.
Oh,
but you did not tell us earlier today that he had been angry throughout the day.
When would I say that?
You described your entire day of doing puzzles and arts and crafts and outside by the dartboard, and you said it was a wonderful day and everything was fun until he was in the suitcase. Did you not testify to that earlier today?
I did.
Okay. My specific question between these two movies is, this is when he begins to get angry and trying to push his way out and to get out of the suitcase, correct?
Angry again, yes.
Okay. And he was expressing his anger in what manner? How did he say this?
At which point throughout the day?
Ma'am, you know very well that I'm talking about between these movies. Please answer my question. Between these two movies, how did he express his anger with you?
Told me that I was going to fucking die.
Okay. Now this is happening after he's already told you several times he cannot breathe in the suitcase, correct?
Correct.
And he's been in there for whatever brief amount of time it took you to.
And here again, I don't want to belabor it, but she's adding, like, she's making it more unbelievable. If he's been mad at you all day, on and off, why would you put him in a suitcase? Like, that just seems like a recipe for disaster. So in effect, you set him up. You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't you just what? All day he's been mad, but you didn't mention it, and it was a good day because you lived. So every day should be a good day for person.
You zip him up, and the laughter stops, and then you go over and begin to film, correct?
Yes.
And you're filming. Your purpose of filming is to kind of teach him a lesson. This is your chance to say something to him when he can't say anything back to you, correct?
No,
Then correct me.
there was no lesson to be learned. It was just I wanted him to try to understand how I felt so maybe he could progress in being a better person the next day.
So you wanted him to understand how you felt in the past, and that's not teaching a lesson?
I just wanted him to understand.
Welcome, Ashley.
Okay. All right, so immediately prior to zipping him up and putting him into the movie, you had been upstairs, correct?
I'm sorry?
Immediately before coming down and zipping him up and then filming the first of the two movies, you had been upstairs in the shower, correct?
Yes.
What was he doing all that time while she was up there? Because he wasn't in the suitcase until she came down the stairs. She caught him getting in. What was going on?
What has been labeled as image_1061, which according to the timeline was captured at 11:03 p.m. 31 seconds with her device.
It's like
All right.
Amber Heard, right?
Does this appear to be the suitcase that's in question in the two movies that are filmed at 11:12 and 11:23 p.m.? Oh.
What's taking her so long to answer? Did I miss it? Did she answer?
This is image 1061 taken at 11:03 p.m. 31 seconds. Does this appear to be the blue suitcase that's in the two videos that were captured at 11:12 and 11:23 p.m.?
Correct.
So she took
Did
this
you take
first.
this image at 11:03 p.m.?
Suitcase is right side up.
I don't remember if I did or not.
And again, we had, and by we I mean you and Mr. Torres, two 1.5 liters bottles of wine and plus whatever was left over from the day before, correct?
Correct.
So you don't remember taking this photograph?
I don't.
Do you remember
Blackout.
whether or not Mr. Torres was in here?
I don't remember taking the photo.
Okay. So what is your memory of what happens between 11:03 p.m. and 31 seconds when that image is captured and then when the movie starts at 11:12:45?
I love that he keeps calling it a movie. She did not. Oh, that's a bad hold. The thing is, like, what she just said doesn't make sense because if she contextually, she should know whether or not he was in that suitcase, even if she doesn't remember, if she's not in a blackout state, right? She's supporting that she's in a blackout state by saying that because that is taken. He's saying it's 11:03. That would be at the top of like closest to 11 o'clock, right? So that was whenever that suitcase got down there, and it's right side up. So then we know at 11:12 in the video, in the movie, as Mr. J calls, I love him for that. It's upside down, and George is talking and moving, right? And so she should know that that was taken before, unless she has no memory of that, which means she has no memory of what's in between the two movies either. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not what she's saying. And I forgot to highlight it. Northwest, I'm with you. I said that, like, if she would have said it was like a BDSM thing gone wrong, she might have walked. or had gotten manslaughter or whatever the least amount is, because she has the other video. She could have said, I'm his dominatrix. I was teaching him and I fell asleep because I'm also an alcoholic, or something to that effect. Like something closer to the truth. I feel like, well, not that that's even the truth now, because she was so awful to him. I mean, she's where she needs to be. I'm not trying to talk her out of it. But if she were really as crafty as she thought, she could have possibly gotten out of it.
What do you remember?
I don't.
Okay. Do you remember anything from that night?
I do.
You told the police on February 25th, 2020, when they first showed you the video, that you didn't remember taking that. You remember that?
I do.
And your testimony is you do remember taking that video,
I do.
but you don't remember taking that photograph 9 minutes prior.
Correct.
Is there something, did you have more to drink in those 9 minutes?
I did not.
So why can't
Was
you
Mr.
remember?
Torres in that suitcase the entire time between 11:03 when that image was taken and then when the second video was taken at 11:23 p.m.?
I believe so, yes.
So for 20 minutes? Yes?
However long the time frame is.
Oh my
Did
God.
he begin telling you that he couldn't breathe before the video, or do you not remember?
I don't remember.
How do you remember in between the two videos?
Now, you testified moments ago that your two neighbors must have misremembered which night the loud noise was, correct?
Yes.
And now you're telling us that you don't remember taking the photograph at 11:03 p.m., correct?
Correct.
Did the police come out to your townhouse on Sunday, February 23rd, 2020?
Yes.
I'm talking about Sunday. This is the Sunday fun day when we're going to Publix twice. Were the police out of your residence?
No.
It was the day after, Monday the 24th, correct?
Yes.
And that Monday morning, you called 911, well, Monday afternoon at about 1 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And between that time frame, you were the only
She gave
person
a
in your
little
apartment
smile.
plus Mr. Torres in the suitcase, correct?
Yes.
So if anything had been disturbed in your apartment, you had all the time that you wanted to undisturb them before calling 911, correct?
If I wanted to.
Okay. And you still, your testimony is there was no loud boom that shook the walls of your townhouse at about 11 p.m. the night of February 23rd, 2020, correct?
Correct.
To the best of your memory, correct?
Correct.
Shade.
Now, that second video is 22 seconds where you just hear him say Sarah and you don't say anything. You're familiar with that video, correct?
Yes.
It's after that that you go upstairs, correct?
Yes.
How quickly does it get you go upstairs after that?
It was pretty quick.
Can you grab the dogs?
No, the dogs were upstairs already.
Okay.
Didn't she say they
Did
followed
you,
her?
call 911 and let the police know that you had zipped somebody shut in a suitcase and they had not been able to get out for 20 minutes?
I did not.
Did you go to Brian's house and tell him, I had to zip Mr. Torres up in a suitcase shut? We need to do something about that before he passes.
I believe that's what the phone call was.
Okay. Well, what do you remember now about the phone call with Brian?
I know that I called him. I don't know specifically what it was about.
Now, your testimony, it seems like you spend day after day finding things to entertain Mr. Torres to do, correct?
Yes.
Almost like having a child. You have your own child, correct?
I do.
What you described sounded like having a small child. Would you agree?
That's your interpretation.
Okay. Well, you take him from doing arts and crafts to doing puzzles, so on and so forth, correct?
When he's been drinking, yes.
And Mr. Torres was notorious for doing some of these things, correct?
What do you mean?
Well, you described Mr. Torres as being notoriously known for doing things. You described your ex-husband, Brian Boone, notorious for doing things like nagging and calling all the time. You remember your testimony calling people notorious for doing things?
Yes.
Notorious.
Say people would say you're notorious for.
I don't know.
Drinking.
You
Nagging.
would not answer Brian Boone, your ex-husband's phone calls just so that you could let him know that you're busy and you have things going on, correct?
I knew that at whatever time it was that he was calling me, that he could wait for the few moments of me getting up to where Lucas gets off school at 3 o'clock.
Okay. But you would return his call. You would let him call several times, correct?
Or, and I know Brian said it was a pattern, or she was cleaning up the mess from whatever when the suitcase went down the stairs and she had that little makeshift thing for the blind and the deaf dog. Yeah, that just sounds super sketch. But it also sounded like she was in the habit of what Mr. J said, of like letting Brian know she had things to do too. And Brian was probably like, yeah, I fund your lifestyle. She didn't care.
That day, yes.
Okay. How about other days? Would he have to call to remind you to get Lucas on other days?
He wasn't reminding me. He was just making sure that Lucas was covered for a pickup or drop off.
All right. You didn't mention
That
to the
sounds
sheriff's
like a
office
reminder.
either February 24th or February 25th about going to Publix with Mr. Torres at noon or 12:17, did you?
I don't recall.
So the best evidence of that would be the recording of those interviews?
Correct.
Did you not remember going to Publix with Mr. Torres that day?
At what point?
At any point?
No, I didn't.
You had indicated to the police that it was about 4 p.m. that you all had started drinking after doing chores. Do you recall that?
I do.
And your testimony today was that it was really more after you guys went to Publix at about 12:17 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And you did not tell the truth to the police, correct?
I'm sorry.
You did not tell the truth to the police about that, correct?
I did not.
And when they were asking you about Mr. Torres' injuries, you told them that you had nothing to do with it, correct?
Yes.
And that was not the truth.
Correct.
What did y'all have for breakfast on the 23rd?
I don't remember.
Did y'all have lunch?
I believe we had leftovers from, I think, something that we had in the fridge.
And do you recall what those were?
Before or after you went to Publix at
Not at this
12:30?
point, no.
And then I believe you mentioned having a sandwich of some sort for dinner.
No, I believe it was for, I'm guessing he and I ate at the same time.
What does the timing have to do with what you ate? We both ate sandwiches. But I think Mr. J's point is well taken. They likely did not eat, and just knowing that they get up late, they probably were not up very long before they went to get the wine, right? We know she called Brian at like 11:47 or something and asked for him to send money because she was in the red or she was overdrawn. So he sent that money and they hightailed it to Publix. I'm guessing because they borrowed that money, they had already finished off that half label of whatever, right? Because she doesn't even remember going to Publix the first trip she was there. George made 2 trips. She didn't remember that he made 2 trips and that she was on one of them. So I think she was already lit up by the time they went to get that first. By the time they went to purchase the new bottle. You know what I mean?
And at one point, Mr. Torres called his brother Juan, correct?
Yes.
And do you admit that you were yelling in the background, telling Mr. Torres to tell his brother that he had been joking you?
I don't know if I was yelling. I know that he could hear me through the phone.
So how long had that been going on that day? When did you start getting on Mr. Torres about joking you in the past?
He and I had conversations about it because he didn't remember doing it to me. And the next day and the day of.
Is it fair to say that there are just points in time where you don't remember what you do either, correct?
Are you talking about almost 5 years ago?
I'm talking about from drinking. Is it fair to say that you don't often remember things that you did while you were drinking?
I would not say often.
Okay. In the course of your relationship with Mr. Torres, are there things you don't remember happening that happened the night before between you and him?
I can't say that at this point.
But you said that you don't remember taking that photograph at 11:03 p.m. on February 23rd, correct?
Yes.
Was there anything else that you were telling Mr. Torres that he needed to tell his brother?
Not that I can recall.
Was there anything you were telling him that he needed to tell his daughters?
Not that I can recall.
Not what she told the therapist.
Now, you indicated that Mr. Torres would use your phone to look at pornography.
Correct.
Were there ever any points in times when it was you looking at pornography?
If I was, it was to go back and look to see.
Look to see what he was watching
Did
specifically.
you ever threaten to get Mr. Torres arrested if he did not do what you wanted him to do?
I wouldn't say threaten.
Okay. Well, were there ever points in times where you would like him to call you or return a call, and if he didn't do that, you would threaten to get him arrested?
It depends on if he had my keys or something that I needed from him.
Okay. And it was your townhouse, correct?
Why did he need to be arrested?
Yes. Flush hours.
When did you get him off the lease?
I'm not sure what year it was, but I don't think he was actually removed from the lease.
Okay.
I think he was made a different type of tenant.
And that right there, that sentence right there is why I believe Melissa Sexton did not come to testify on Sarah's behalf. He could not legally be removed from that lease because Sarah did not qualify on her own, with her own funds, right? She only got $1,000 for child support, for alimony, and then $100 for child support. That was $1,100. I believe the apartment was $1,600. We did a video on it, but it's somewhere around there. $1,600 for her town home, as she likes to say. And so I think Melissa really, really liked Sarah, wanted to help her out of a bad situation. Sarah spotted her because Melissa identifies as a DV victim. She's Melissa, one of her prior cases, is the reason that Sarah got one of her public defenders conflicted out because they had represented Melissa's ex in that. And if Melissa was going to be a witness, there was a conflict, right? So I think Melissa was trying to help Sarah out, did her a solid, and told George, you've been removed from the lease. But you'd have to go to court to do that, right? And I mean, I'm sure, happy-go-lucky drunk George was like, okay, I'm kicked off and didn't investigate it. But there are no court filings removing him. He signed the lease again in January of 2020, a month before she murdered him. So this is all a lie that they concocted to get George out of there, which now makes sense why Melissa went above and beyond to make sure he got his bike back and make sure she didn't want the police out there investigating any of that, right? And it's weird too, because I always wondered, why would the police take her word that he was removed from the lease? Because normally that's a civil issue. It's not something the police handle. But anyway, that's my theory. That is, I believe, why Melissa didn't show up, because she was a sympathetic witness for Sarah and would have been helpful. But Mr. J, so astutely he did here, would have questioned her about that on cross-examination, and then all of her credibility goes out once we find out she lied about that. So no point in having her, testify.
And did you change the locks so that he couldn't get back in at the points of times when you picked him out?
I did sometimes.
Okay. And then would you leave the key in the hiding spot that he was aware of?
There were multiple hiding places.
Okay. On any of the 911 calls, did you ever mention that Mr. Torres was aware of where you kept your keys and that's how you got back into the house?
No, I needed to.
Okay.
He would never break into my home.
All right, it's your testimony that you did not push him down the stairs, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, it was him that dragged you down the stairs the night before, correct?
Yes.
Now, by dragged, did you leave your feet?
Yes.
And did you get scrapes on your knees or anywhere from the carpet?
I'm not sure.
Did you get any injuries, like bruises or abrasions or scrapes?
I was missing a wad of my hair. Yes, that was on the stairwell.
Okay. And you agree that you were photographed on February 24th when the police came out, correct?
The day of the incident?
Well, the afternoon after the incident. We're not sure when he passed.
Yes.
Some of those photographs showed ashtrays inside your house. I thought you said you guys couldn't smoke inside your house,
We couldn't.
but you did. Right?
Sometimes, yes.
And you agree you would go to the hospital and tell them things that were not true, correct?
Yes.
There were times where you would go to the hospital and leave without getting treatment, correct?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that you often had alcohol in your system when you were going to the hospital, correct?
Sometimes.
A 100%, CJ.
All right, so just to summarize the day to make sure we understand it. You all wake up sometime in the morning, but it's an unknown time, correct? On February 23rd.
Or early afternoon. I had a problem with the detectives and them having me guesstimate times.
Okay. Are you the kind of person, like most of us, that uses your phone when you wake up?
No.
So the first activity on your phone may have nothing to do with when you woke up. Is that fair for you?
Yes, other than looking at the time.
Okay. So.
Carl, that's
at
where
some
he
point
was
you wake up,
going.
It doesn't sound like you have breakfast, correct?
Right.
You do some chores, correct?
Yes.
So that is true. That part of it is true. You did do chores before going to Publix at 12:17?
Yes.
All right. After chores, you go to Publix and you get that 1.5 liter Magnum bottle of Woodbridge Chardonnay, correct?
I'm not sure what Magnum is.
1.5 liters. Instead of the 750s, it's the double size. It's like 2 bottles of wine.
Okay, yes.
So you got a 1.5 liter, right?
Yes, it is the larger bottle.
And you got home, and you at 100 pounds and Mr. Torres at 103 pounds began drinking this wine, correct?
I'm guessing so. I'm not going to guess times.
Well, don't guess. I mean, you got home from Publix. When was your first drink?
I'm not sure. I mean, we could have continued to do whatever was left over from what we didn't do before we went to Publix.
Okay. So you may have started drinking even later.
When was your first drink?
Then
12:30 when you get back from Publix?
I don't know.
Okay. Was it 1:30 or 2:30 when you began drinking?
I don't know.
All right. Was it before any of the phone calls to the brothers and his daughters?
Yes.
And so you drink what's left in the bottle of wine from the day before that's halfway labeled, correct?
At some point.
And then you drink 1.5 liters of wine, and he goes out and gets another one on his own without your permission or suggestion about 5:30, correct?
Correct.
And then you all consume that one as well, and it ends up in the trash can at the end of the night, correct?
Apparently.
Okay. At what point in the night does your memory tape stop? Because you described that it wasn't on at 11:03 p.m. when that photograph was taken. What's the last thing you actually do remember prior to these videos being made?
I don't recall it at this point. I don't remember.
Okay. All right. And so it ends in hide and seek after arts and puzzles, correct?
Yeah.
He says, tag, you're it, but you run and go upstairs and hide, right?
Yes.
So does that mean he's it and he's supposed to come find you?
No.
Okay.
Just,
So you both hide?
no.
Okay. How does this work?
I don't know how to tell you.
Okay.
I was it, and I went ahead.
I mean, my understanding of the rules of hide and seek is one person will be it, cover his or her eyes and count to like 20 and then go find the person that's hiding. Is that your familiarity with the rules too, or do you guys have house rules?
I understand how the
Okay.
hide and seek works.
All right, let's see what's going on. Hug the ones you're with, love the ones you're with. What are you grateful for? I hope something. Fireworks are going up in Manhattan. I hear them right up off my terrace here. Do it. 20.
So explain to me, what was your expectation? You go up to the shower. Were you expecting him to come find you?
I was.
Okay. And after a while, he did not come find you.
Yes.
And that's when you returned downstairs.
Correct.
And because of the way your townhouse is set up, you can kind of see over where the suitcase is and that he's trying to hide in there, but it's not successfully hidden just yet.
I mean, yes, you have to come down a good ways in order to be able to.
Right. But you testified those before you got to the bottom.
Yes.
All right. And then you come over there and thinking that it's funny, you zip him shut, correct?
Yes, we both thought it was funny.
Okay. Can the defendant stand down?
Entered into the well?
Yes.
Yes.
You go down?
Deputy. Could we release her
Now,
into the
I
well, please?
wonder why Owens didn't object to this. Yeah. He seemed uneasy. Getting his gloves on, all of that, getting his face out. Look at her body language. I know we all agree differently, but good Lord, what is happening?
All right. Ms. Boone, can you demonstrate for the jury where Mr. Torres' head was and how his body was positioned in the suitcase, if you don't mind?
His back was this way and his head was here.
All right, and then is it fair to say his feet are kind of down here, which would be the front left corner from their perspective in the jury box?
Yes.
And then his knees are kind of tucked up towards his face.
If I remember correctly, yes, that's the position.
Okay. All right. Can you help me understand how it was that
Inconvenient,
as
if I remember correctly. Wouldn't that be in your mind forever? Your boyfriend is using a suitcase?
Would it be easier to put it down here?
I didn't want to make you go down there. If you're happy doing that, I'll let you.
Hold on. Does she need to be wearing gloves?
Yes. Agreed. If she's going to be manipulating it.
Yes, yawning right now. Yes.
What do you want her to do?
Just demonstrate how she zipped it shut.
Okay, well, where's the paperclip? And do you remember what?
Where's the paper clip? Okay. Wait, I gotta make myself bigger. Hold on. It's like, where's the paper? Wait, where's the paper clip?
This side.
Remember, it's a broken suitcase. Make it hard for me. There you go, my lady. That's your paper clip.
Just paperclip was on when this event occurred. When we pulled the suitcase out earlier, the paperclip was not attached. So now the prosecutors attached the paperclip. We don't know if that's the way it was attached.
Why would it matter? We just want to know the position.
That's the proper way that it was attached. But he's asking her now to pull.
Is there an objection?
Yes?
Approach.
Get your ass over here, Owens. Oh, over here, over here. This is silly. Then Mr. Henderson is coming on up. For what reason? Oh, and is that Mr. Beck? We need all three of them up there to discuss the positioning of it. They're in a bad spot right now. They don't know how to get out of it. She shouldn't be down there with that suitcase, especially because they're looking at the table. They're sitting, looking from the table, looking at her affect. Like, she is this is an inconvenience for her to be there. It's a bad look. It's a bad look. So they're trying to figure out how to get her the hell out of there. And you see Owens didn't sit back down. He's nervous, rightfully so. There's fireworks, guys, if you hear it. Happy New Year. They do a big display. I'm right above Central Park, 3 blocks north of Central Park, and they do like this big display. See, it's the quieter version of going downtown to Times Square. But I've seen the ball drop twice. Once before I lived here, once since I've lived here. I took my sister. I work for a media company, so I got to badge through. I did not have to stand out in the line waiting for porta potties and whatnot all night because it gets cold. Although this year would have been a good year. It's not too cold. Oh my God. What are they asking? They're not talking about the paperclip this whole time. That's what I'm saying. Like, Owens is nervous. He's probably asking Mr. J, like, where are you going with this? You know what I mean? Trying to get more information so he can kind of put some guardrails on it because it's a bad look. Even like hit her, having him put the suitcase on the ground, and then she just seemed like she was ready to hop on it. You know what I mean? Like, ma'am, that is a coffin. Your boyfriend, the last time you saw that, had just been in. Well, she saw it for discovery, but you know what I mean. Just like calm yourself. Objection overruled. He's gonna pull on that.
Can we see how it was that the two zipper parts were positioned when you say that Mr. Torres was able to get his hand out? If you want me to do it, I'm fine to take your direction.
From what I remember, this is how the suitcase was.
Like, wouldn't you choke up? Like, oh my God. Oh, I don't want to remember anything.
This was not this hard either. So this was like here.
Okay.
Right here.
I'm going to speed it up a little bit more.
Okay, there now?
Sure.
I assume this one was much closer? It's not over there? Where do you...
You asked me where I zipped it.
When you say that it zipped shut, show us.
Are you talking about how I zipped it, or?
When you're done zipping it shut and he's inside of it, where are the zipper components? Just tell me what's set up.
I mean, it was the corner. I mean, it's not. Yes, this one was on the attached. From what I can remember. That's how he was coming with his hand out. It was like this from the corner part.
Okay. Thank you. You can return your seat. Did you ever change the position of those zippers once you put it in that position?
I did not.
And so once he was zipped into there, there's some amount of time, but you don't remember specifically before you start taking the 2-minute video, correct?
Yes.
And then that's when you say what you say, and that's when he says what he says. We've all heard it, correct? And then between there, in that second video to 22 seconds length, it's at this point where he's beginning to get angry. And then that's when you take the baseball bat that's in evidence, and your testimony is start poking him at the end of it.
Did you say this was the second video?
Between the two videos, that's when you started hitting with the bat as he was getting angry and trying to escape, correct?
Right, I was not hitting him. I was, yes.
Okay. Did you ever hit him with the bat while he was outside the suitcase?
No.
So each time that he is hit with the bat, it's through this suitcase. And that's what leaves the marks on him. You didn't hit him with the bat outside the suitcase, correct?
Yes, you let me get it straight.
No, that's okay. Suitcase keep herself. And then you take the second video and you go upstairs and go to bed.
Why would she offer to demonstrate with the bat? Like, what is she thinking? Would you like me to demonstrate? As I've hopped over this coffin, complained about the paper clip, I can hop down with the bat if you'd like.
Correct.
I apparently went upstairs and I used the phone to make a phone call.
Okay.
And then I fell asleep.
All right. And at the point in time when you left and went upstairs, he was still inside the suitcase, correct?
Correct.
Was he still asking for you and calling your name?
Not that I can recall.
Did you say shh to him again?
I don't remember.
Did you tell him that this was his problem and it's on you again?
I don't remember.
Did you do anything to help him escape from the predicament that you zipped him up in?
No.
No other questions.
Any redirect examination?
Ms. Boone, he just asked you the question that you poked him, and you didn't poke him. You poked, every time you poked him hard with the bat, he was inside the briefcase,
The suitcase, yes.
the suitcase. But you remember when he put his hand out, did you not hit him in the hand outside the suitcase?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the only time the bat touched Mr. Torres's body outside the suitcase,
Yes.
was when you hit him with a hand. But all the other injuries were with you poking him pretty hard. I mean, you bruised your hand, correct? Doing that. Thank you.
Did he say you bruised your hand?
Ma'am, you can return to counsel's table.
Judge.
Oh my God.
Just a moment. Let me get her situated at table, and then we can press.
Also, with that whole phone thing that she just said, originally what she told the police was that she left her phone downstairs. Just like she said, the dogs followed her upstairs. The truth ain't in her, because she shouldn't struggle like that, right? The truth is not going to change. She just lies about everything for no reason. Although I guess in a fragile ego, I don't know, is that like what am I trying to say? A reflex? Like her ego is so fragile she has to make sure nobody thinks she's ever made a mistake. Is that a thing? Sorry, I'm trying to go for some reason I closed this. No, I gotta find it. The closing. We have Mr. Cacciatore with his guns out. Make sure you guys can see that. Not too big. I like this little circle, except I gotta figure out how to stay in the middle of it. Okay. Before we go on to closing, let's go through the comments and just do a little check-in. She needs to be right all the time. Yeah, it's really, really odd. Because also it keeps you stagnant, right? If you never make a mistake, you can't learn, change, and grow because everything you're doing is perfect. So apparently, since 16, she's been perfect and has had no need to learn anything. She told detectives Click was at top upstairs, yet she forgot when she went upstairs. Gotcha. I would even pay. Oh, someone's other conversation. Okay, I'm going to go into this then. I'm going to speed it up and we're going to get the show on the road. Let's get into it.
This is a box. This is the box where George Torres was killed. It's a small box, 28 by 20 by 8 7/8 inches. George Torres was zipped up in this box. George Torres took his last panicked breaths in this box. The medical examiner explained to us that with each breath George Torres took in, there was less oxygen in this box. George Torres was murdered in this box. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself, my trial partner, we thank you for your time and attention in this most important of trials. We now have the law from the judge in this case. This is what our duty is to follow. And let's have a discussion regarding that law that we've just been read and given. The first section of note.
I agree, Kim.
It's called Introduction to Homicide. But this being a legal document written by
I
a bunch
don't
of
think
lawyers
he got in there
we've
willingly.
seen for the last 2 weeks arguing with each other, pay careful attention to ands and ors. Remember, if an and is somewhere, we're going to need both things or all the things, and if an or is there, then only one of those things we're going to need. So as we start out here on Introduction to Homicide, we come to the first section on justifiable homicide. It reads, killing of a human being is justifiable homicide and lawful, if necessarily done while resisting an attempt to murder or commit a felony upon the defendant, or to commit a felony in any dwelling house in which the defendant was at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, this section is completely inapplicable. It's inapplicable because George Torres was zipped up in that suitcase. He couldn't commit or attempt to commit a murder on anybody. He couldn't even scratch his own head while he was in that suitcase. Next, we turn to excusable homicide. Here we have several paragraphs. It reads, the killing of a human being is excusable and therefore lawful under any one of the following 3 circumstances. When the killing is committed by accident and in misfortune, doing any lawful act by lawful means, usual, ordinary caution, and without any unlawful intent. Well, the problem in this circumstance for the defendant is that she took the law into her own hands. Her testimony was that when George Torres was in here, he was laughing and giggling and they were joking. And then he started to complain that he couldn't breathe. And that's when she said that she wanted him to stay in there so he could feel uncomfortable. So he could feel her grievances. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not lawful. That is not the use of ordinary caution. And that is not applicable in this circumstance.
This was so masterful.
When the killing occurs by accident or misfortune, in the heat of passion, upon any sudden and sufficient provocation. George Torres couldn't provoke anything from his circumstance. George Torres was confined to this box. Next, when the killing is committed by accident and misfortune resulting from a sudden combat, a dangerous weapon is not used, and the killing is not done in a cruel and unusual manner. This fails on 2 counts. There was no sudden combat. In her words, this was laughing and joking, and we're all having fun when she decides that it's going to get a little extra real for George Torres. And it fails on the second
Not
count
extra real, Mr.
because George
Castro.
Torres was killed in a cruel and unusual manner.
Yes.
Next, we turn to our main charge, second-degree murder. The law informs us that to prove the crime of second-degree murder, the state must prove the following 3 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. I think it's important to stop right here. This sentence right here is telling us what has to be proven in order for the crime of second-degree murder to be for the defendant to be found guilty in this case. We've been hearing all kinds of facts for almost 2 weeks now of trial, but these are the 3 facts that had to have been met by the reasonable doubt standard in order to be found guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that the state has proven second-degree murder beyond all doubt. And the proof of that guilt is overwhelming. But I will cite for each element just one fact that conclusively proves each of those elements beyond all doubt. As to the first fact, that George Torres is dead.
All right, Lana, I see people talking to you in the chat. I haven't seen you comment, but hello if you're here.
As to the second fact, the death was caused by Sarah Boone. Sarah Boone, in her own words, from the time that this case began on February 23rd, 2020, to when she took the witness stand a few days ago, was consistent about one statement. She zipped him up. didn't zip him out. She zipped him up in the suitcase, and she refused to zip him out. 3, there was an unlawful killing of George Torres by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. The law goes on to define for us what a depraved mind is, and also what an act is. It's going to tell us that an act includes any series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. An act is imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind if it is an act or a series of acts that 1, a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily harm to another, and is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and is of such a nature that the act itself displays the difference in human life. Ladies and gentlemen, her conduct fits every one of those things. And if there was a scintilla of doubt that this was not the actions of a depraved mind, I point to you.
You see, he did that bring around to scintilla.
States 17. Mr. J.
The callback
States 17.
from Kranik. Trigger warning, sorry guys, trigger warning.
For
trigger
everything
warning.
you've done to me.
Sarah,
Fuck you.
Sarah,
Fuck you.
Sarah,
Stupid.
Sarah,
That's my name. Don't wear it on.
Sarah, I can't fucking breathe, babe. Sarah,
Yeah, that's when you do me, shake me.
Sarah.
It's rough every time. Good Lord. Oh, this is his mom. I did not hear an audible. I see the daughter running after her, and I don't know who that was in between. But I've never met this man, and it chokes me up. So I can't imagine how his mother felt. She brought him into this world, you know. I feel like Mr. Cacciatore and Mr. J have done a good job of emphasizing, and she's mad about it. Bitch, why are you mad? Did a good job of containing, emphasizing how he was contained and confined, like the little things, like he couldn't scratch his own head. Also, how Mr. J had her point out where he was positioned within the
You may continue.
suitcase, so you understand like how restricted he was. To understand how ridiculous the fingers coming out is
Sarah,
a sign of imminent danger.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah,
Real ransom. Now you want to give it for it extra.
Wriggle around some.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to get a video of it.
Real extra.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
Oh, that's what I get like when you cheat on me.
Sarah,
Fuck you.
can't breathe, Sarah.
Yeah. You should probably shut the fuck up.
Sarah.
Shh.
So even that line, you should probably shut the F up. You know he's using up oxygen.
That exhibit
You're telling him to
removes any
refrain from
doubt
using it.
about the depravity of the defendant's actions. But we know from the evidence that this was not the first time she had considered killing George Torres. We know from the evidence that on January 13th, 2020, approximately 1 month prior to George Torres's murder, the defendant had a text message conversation. Please do something with yourself, Sarah. God bless you. And bless you and all of you too. I'll get rid of him. Then I'll be better. Torres. But ladies and gentlemen, in this case, the law actually specifically tells us that the intent to cause death is not necessary. In order to convict of second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove the defendant had an intent to cause death.
So it doesn't matter intentional or not.
Next, we turn. I'm going to bypass the lesser included offenses because though she is guilty of those offenses as well, the law instructs us that she is to be convicted of for the highest offense in which the evidence supports, which is second-degree murder in this case. So turning our attention towards voluntary intoxication. If there was any question about the fact that Sarah imbibed alcohol on the night that George Torres was murdered, and that maybe somehow that would excuse the conduct or be some type of defense.
Okay, really quick, because I just randomly thought of this. Do you guys think if she would have let go of the intentional, not intentional, right? Like as he explained it here, it's irrespective, it's still second degree, you don't need an intent. If she had, because I feel like that also got confusing at the end between it was an accident and it's still self-defense, which we had already learned weeks prior in the Wagner case. It can't be an accident. And do you know what I mean? Like, is it because she didn't want to be wrong? Like that part I'm curious. What do you think? Like, why didn't she let that intentional, not intentional accident part out?
For the conduct. Well, this tells us that that's not the case. Voluntary intoxication resulting from the use of alcohol is not a defense to a crime. Evidence of a defendant's voluntary intoxication may not be taken into consideration to show that she lacked the specific intent to commit any crime. A person is voluntarily intoxicated if he or she knowingly consumed a substance that he or she knew or should have known could cause intoxication. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense to second-degree murder, manslaughter, or culpable negligence. Ladies and gentlemen, there's ample evidence of the defendant's intoxication from watching her on the public surveillance, buying the bottles of wine with George Torres, to her admissions to drinking, to her voice that we heard on the video while she was torturing George Torres. Next, we come to defenses. First, we come to the justifiable use of deadly force. It tells us it is a defense to the crimes of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and culpable negligence if the actions of Sarah Boone were justifiable use or threatened use of deadly force. Sarah Boone does not have the burden of proving that she was justified in using deadly force. Instead, for you to find Sarah Boone guilty, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Sarah Boone was not justified in using deadly force. The law on the justifiable use of deadly force is as follows. Sarah Boone
It's
was
the
justified in
state's
using deadly
burden, is
force.
what he's
He
saying.
reasonably believed that such force or threat of force was necessary to prevent the imminent death or great bodily harm to herself. Sarah Boone had no duty to retreat. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments, Mr. Owens will rise, and he's going to show you this. And this.
This wasn't the best.
And this.
Took the wind out of his sails.
And he's going to talk, and this as well, about the list of grievances that Sarah Boone had for George Torres. He's gonna talk to you about curtain rods. He's gonna talk to you about black eyes. He's gonna talk to you about what an awful, awful boyfriend George Torres was. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of all of that, it still will not change the fact that the defendant is not entitled to the justifiable use of deadly force. Because as we continue to read this instruction, it tells us, in deciding whether Sarah Boone was justified in using the use of deadly force, you must consider the circumstances at the time the force or the threat of force was used. Danger need not have been actual. However, to justify the use of deadly force, the appearance of imminent danger must have been so real that Sarah Boone actually believed that deadly force was necessary. Moreover, to justify the use of deadly force, and this is important, a reasonably cautious and prudent person under the same circumstances would have believed the use of deadly force was necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, no reasonably prudent and cautious person would believe that a man.
Okay, does she get an extra, I don't want to say a bonus point, but does she get some grace, I guess, for having the PTSD? Because a reasonably prudent versus reasonably a prudent suffering from PTSD might not be the same, no? Or how does that work? Like, why do we go through the whole PTSD thing? Because that was a sticking point for him.
Who could barely fit into this box, who was incapable of movement, who was begging for his life, who was slowly asphyxiating, suffocating with each breath, would have needed to use deadly force against him. The justifiable use of deadly force utterly fails, utterly crashes like a house of cards. But there's more. However,
I love Emily D. Baker, but June, thank you for sharing this, because I was thinking that too, and I'm like, that's what he gets for being old school, because in this century, we just make slides and put it up on that thing on the screen, sir. We don't walk around with poster boards, and had he had slides, Cacciatore would not have been able to do that. Sometimes it doesn't pay to kick it old school ones.
the use of deadly force is not justified if you find that Sarah Boone used force to initially provoke threatened use of force against herself. Let's stop there before we consider the next two paragraphs. Some of the most critical testimony in this trial is her testimony on the stand. It was a great day. We were doing puzzles, artwork, dancing with the dogs, listening to music. Tag, you're it, hide and go seek time. George gets into the suitcase. She comes and zips him up. But we're still laughing about it. We're still laughing.
Oh my God. Hold on, LW. I thought he took it down. I was doing research. Somebody asked me to look up something on Owens, and I was trying to do a screen grab. And his whole website, it wasn't even a 404 error. It was just like, poof. Like he gave up the domain. I don't know what's going on with that, but I did think that was weird. Sorry, guys.
After he zipped up in the suitcase. And then that's when George had the temerity to ask, George Torres had the temerity to ask to be unzipped from the suitcase. And that's when Sarah Boone decided he needed to suffer. She was the initial aggressor, ladies and gentlemen. She provoked the use of force in this case. In her own words, we were laughing and playing right before he wanted to be let out because he couldn't breathe. Paragraph 1. The threat of force asserted toward the defendant was so great that she reasonably believed that she was in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm and had exhausted every reasonable means to escape the danger other than using deadly force on George
Henderson
Torres.
has a separate practice.
He couldn't exert anything, ladies and gentlemen. George Torres couldn't even exert his arm out of the suitcase. How on earth could he have exerted a force so great to justify his Judge object?
Approach.
These objections. Yeah. Goodness. Of a magnificent. Yeah, I'm actually impressed with Mr. Cacciatore. In the earlier days of this year, when I really started like hawking this case, I thought he was a little passive, but he's actually, between he and Mr. J, they're a nice mix. You know, I'm here for all of Mr. J's snark. Yeah, I actually like both of them. I thought they did a great job. I thought they collaborated well and built the story together. Do you
Objection
know?
overruled.
This is no help to the defendant.
Defense didn't feel as
Second
cohesive
paragraph.
to me. Like, you could tell they were
In good faith,
on different schedules and
Sarah
different
Boone withdrew from
locations.
physical contact with George Torres and clearly indicated to George Torres that she wanted to withdraw and stop the use of deadly force. But George Torres continued or resumed the threatened use of deadly force. Ladies and gentlemen, George Torres never got a chance to do anything. George Torres never was able to mount any aggression towards the defendant. Therefore, this paragraph is inapplicable. And the law tells us as well that physical contact in this case includes any restraint on George Torres's movements. The law also tells us, again, you find that Sarah Boone, because of prior threats or difficulties with George Torres, had reasonable grounds to believe that she was in danger of great bodily harm, of death or great bodily harm at the hands of George Torres. You may consider this fact in determining whether the actions of Sarah Boone were reasonable. Now, we're going to get to battered spouse syndrome in a moment. But again, I submit to you, this will be the opportunity for the defense to air grievances in regards to George Torres. But again, those grievances will not change the law, and they will not change the fact that justifiable use of deadly force fails as a defense for the defendant. If you find that at the time of the alleged second-degree murder, manslaughter, culpable negligence, Sarah Boone knew that George Torres had committed an act or acts of violence, you may consider that fact in determining whether Sarah Boone reasonably believed it was necessary for her to use deadly force. Considering the issue of deadly force, you may take into account the relative physical abilities and capacities of Sarah Boone and George Torres. Now we come to the special instruction on battered spouse. You have heard evidence that Sarah Boone suffers from battered spouse syndrome. If you find Sarah Boone suffered from battered spouse syndrome credible, you may consider this evidence to assist you in determining whether, in Sarah Boone's circumstances, would reasonably believe that such force was necessary to defend herself against the imminent use of unlawful force by George Torres. Like other witnesses, you may believe or disbelieve all or any part of the testimony in regards to battered spouse. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from 3 experts in the areas of battered spouse in this case. I think at the outset, it's important to note what battered spouse is and isn't and what the law instructs us here. Battered spouse is not some carte blanche. Battered spouse is not a license to kill. The fact that George Torres at points mistreated Sarah Boone, did things that were worthy enough to get him arrested, to get restraining orders placed upon him, doesn't mean that she walks around with an ace in her pocket when it comes to George Torres. It doesn't mean that because he did these awful bad things, that now through the rest of time, she's a battered spouse and she just has the right to kill him. or to make him suffer, or to punish him, or to make him feel uncomfortable, or decide that he needs to be confined to a box. No. What the battered spouse syndrome instruction does is it talks about the imminency of fear. And when we heard about that testimony, we heard about it from Dr. Harper, and we heard about it from Dr. Brannon for the defense. And some of the testimony was a little difficult to understand at points, but there was one point in Dr. Brannon's testimony that was very critical. Dr. Brannon talked about rule-outs. He talked about the fact that when emotions and emotional reactions are involved, like trauma and trauma-based disorders, other possibilities have to be ruled out before we can even ascribe those actions to battered spouse syndrome. Other possibilities, according to Dr. Brannon, include alcohol abuse. Dr. Harper should have listened to Dr. Brannon's testimony because Dr. Brannon completely undercut Dr. Harper's testimony. Dr. Harper relied heavily on the words of the defendant, who was abusing alcohol at the time of these events. And then you heard from the expert for the state, Tanya Warner. In her opinion, was much more straightforward. Remember, Dr. Brannon did not render an opinion as to whether or not she suffered from battered spouse. Dr. Warner said affirmatively, yes, I believe she did suffer from battered spouse syndrome. But she also applied what Dr. Brannon was talking about. Other possibilities have to be ruled out as the trigger for a behavior, for an event. So in Dr. Warner's estimation, the fact that at the time of this incident, they were laughing and joking and carrying on meant that the trigger was not domestic violence or some threat. In the defendant's own words, the trigger was him wanting to get out and her being reminded of the bad things that he had done to her. That's not imminence of fear. That's a reminder of bad things a person has done. And again, even if you were to believe that she was battered spouse triggered at the time of this event, it still does not save the day. Because all the battered spouse trigger law tells us is that it goes to that imminency requirement. It doesn't say there's no imminency requirement. It doesn't say that, look, if you're suffering from battered spouse and you're triggered by battered spouse, then, hey, there's no more imminency requirement, do as you wish. It just gives
Just go in and shoot up the place.
the ladies and gentlemen of the jury another thing to consider in determining whether or not that threat was imminent. And we know from the evidence, we know from the videos, there was absolutely no threat. And we know there was no threat because
Look
George
at
Torres
Daddy
never got
Craig's face.
out of that box. He was never got out of that box until sometime on the early afternoon of February 24th. Mr. J, can you please publish from stage 21?
I love this three-piece suit on him too. Oh my god, that vest. The cut is perfect. Floor 3440. I agree. I'm glad he stepped up. He didn't have much to lose, and she got to run the defense that she wanted to run, and he was able to guide her through the legal part of it, because that's the part that she would have struggled with as pro se. But yeah, basically, he was a supporting role for her.
I'm gonna go to court and I'm gonna tell the judge, listen, my fiance has nothing to do with it. It's all my fault. We were both taken and got in an isolated situation that has never happened before. I love my fiance. She's a good woman. For being in trouble in her life, she has a 7-year-old son that she loves and cherishes.
A blind Boston Terrier.
She has 2 dogs. One is blind, one is deaf. She goes around and she's driving and sees an animal that's injured. She'll stop in the middle of the street, no matter what kind of traffic it is, just to make sure that that animal doesn't get injured any more than where it already has.
That is not the flex y'all think it is. That's dangerous.
Every relationship has their arguments. but we are not the type of people that you guys are portraying us to be,
She especially.
especially her. So please,
Oh
if
my
you
God.
can,
Dismissed.
dismiss this case,
Closed.
drop it. She is not the type of person,
Good person.
great person.
Angel.
I know she'd be an angel, but she's close to it.
He was like, I'm not going there.
Yes, ma'am. And I love you to death. And I hate that we're going through this.
Oh,
On
I
it.
love you to death.
What?
Yes,
In the
you
head.
did.
I love you. Whatever you want to say. God will prevail, and it will take us out of this situation. Love you.
Oh.
Clearly.
Love you to death.
George Torres is dominating the defendant. Clearly, George Torres is the one telling the defendant what to do. Clearly, George Torres is the one calling the shots at 4748 France Lane.
Court.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Too soon.
are we so sure that George Torres wasn't the person suffering from battered spouse syndrome?
That's what knocked Owen's wig back. That line right there.
Next,
He wasn't ready for that, which is
we're going to come
lawyers should
To
be ready
justify
for all
use.
points of the argument.
of non-deadly force. The language of the arguments are pretty close to what we've already heard in the deadly force instruction, including the key language that it requires a reasonably cautious and prudent person under the same circumstances would have believed that the use of non-deadly force was necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that this was not a case of non-deadly force. George Torres lost his life as a result of these actions. We have heard the testimony of Dr. Sarah Zadovich, who described his cause and manner of death, who described the mechanism of death, how that oxygen dissipated in that suitcase. And when we also look at the imminency, we heard in opening statements by Mr. Owens that, the big threat in this case, the awful threat, was in the magic 9 minutes between the video at 11:12 that she took, torturing George Torres, to her follow-up video at 11:23, after she had moved the suitcase. Mr. J, we published from States 17, IMG 1063.
Trigger warning just in case. Walk away if you need to. I'm not sure what I don't remember what he's about to show. Is that their laptop with all the notifications? Hmm.
It was a short video. But what's one of the things that we notice by this point? You can hear how loud George's voice is on the 11:12 video. But now, roughly 11 minutes later, from the time that started, you see that the makeshift coffin that he's in has been moved. And his voice now is softer.
And he
The
knows.
life is draining from George Torres, and it's evident in that video.
He knows he's
And that,
dying.
ladies and gentlemen, is evidence that there was no threat in the magic 9 minutes that was not recorded. There was only George Torres in this box, slowly being killed. Next, we come to weighing the evidence. This instruction tells us it is up to you to decide what evidence is reliable. You should use your common sense in deciding which is the best evidence and which evidence should not be relied upon in considering your verdict. You may find some of the evidence not reliable or less reliable than other evidence. You should consider how the witness acted as well as what they said. Some things you should consider. Did the witness have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testified? In focusing on the defendant, absolutely. Two people walked through the front door on the evening of February 23rd, 2020 at 4748 France Court. George Torres and Sarah Boone. But only Sarah Boone ever walked out that front door alive. Did the witness seem to have an accurate memory? This is an emphatic no. And the litany of her intoxication in versions of events is evidence of that. Was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? I would submit to you she wasn't. 4, did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? Clearly.
Yes.
Does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony and other evidence in the case? And I would say largely no. Because on the issue of whether or not George Torres could have threatened her the way she says that he did, the answer is clearly no, and we know that from the forensic data. We know that from the items itself. Did the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? In regards to the defendant, it's almost more appropriate to ask about the time she did make a consistent statement. You listen to her version of events on the 911 call, on the body cameras, on her first interviews with law enforcement, and then you hear her in her next interview the next day with Detective Popsel and Detective Lowen.
I agree.
More details come out, things change. First, she was never intoxicated, then she was intoxicated. Then there's just the whole fact of she omits the fact of, oh yeah, he was actually trying to attack me. Oh yeah, I was in fear for my life. When she said at every turn, no, it was just a great day. We were having fun. Oh my God, I can't believe this. We were doing good. The only stress we had was about jobs. And now, 4.5 years after the fact, it's time to come up with a new story. But ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that the truth does not change. The facts do not change. The videos do not change. And on any version of events that the defendant has given, they all add up to the fact that there is absolutely no doubt that she is guilty of murder. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any doubt about the defendant's guilt when she described using that baseball bat to hit George Torres's fingers back in the suitcase when he attempted to save his life? Do you have any doubt when she is given how many versions of events in this case? Do you have any doubt after hearing the testimony of her neighbors about the loud crash and arguing that night? Do you have any doubt after hearing the testimony of Dr. Sarah Zagovich? Do you have any doubt after watching the videos of George Torres being murdered and her laughing about it and talking about the fact that he cheated on her? Do you have any doubt after reading the text messages from her phone, after seeing the videos of how she controlled and manipulated George Torres? And if you say, Mr. Cacciatore, I still have a doubt, well then the law asks you, is that doubt to an element? And is that doubt a mere possible doubt, a speculative, an imaginary or a forced doubt. I submit to you the idea that she had to do this because she was a battered spouse is an imaginary doubt. It's a doubt born from the imagination of Sarah Boone. It is not a reasonable doubt. But if you find yourself back in that deliberation room, and you are just trying to think of some way in which the defendant is not guilty, just searching, struggling for that way, that also is not a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen. That is a forced doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm confident that when you read the entirety of those jury instructions and apply the law to the facts that came out in this case, that you are going to come back with the only lawful verdict, which is guilty as charged, second-degree murder. Thank you.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, how are you doing? It's 4 minutes before somebody else's New Year. I know someone else said they had to wait till 1. I want to do Owens, and then we may not get to her. We'll see how we feel. We'll check in. But yeah, masterful, just masterful. Yeah, they just did an amazing job. Because I know everybody's like, oh, why didn't they go for first degree? But they may not have gotten second, like if they hadn't. And actually, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, the defense helped them with that, right? By showing all of that body cam footage and the other footage. It came in because the judge did allow the battered spouse defense, right? And so those came in as prior bad acts. Like they laid it out so beautifully. Because I think of like the Susan Lawrence case where she actually shot the woman through the door and she got manslaughter and got like 25 years, which is like a death sentence to her because she's elderly and she's ill. But anyway, and that they like there was a lot of stuff in the community because they, I guess, were a little bit lagging on. That's one of the ones I'll probably film tomorrow or record tomorrow and show. But there was like community outreach because they were saying because she was a white woman who shot a black woman, they weren't taking it seriously. So it took a while. So there's that factor in there. But still, they went for manslaughter, right? Where the prosecution here was confident that they could get the second degree. Of course, manslaughter would have been lesser included, like just in case. But they were confident with going with the. I mean, I think it's commendable. I think they were really well prepared. I mean, they had 4 years to be fair, but they could have slept on it, or they could have thought, oh, it's too much of a slam dunk, or do you know what I mean? I think they did right by the Torres family. Okay, what am I looking for? James Owens. And James Owens and Tony Henderson know each other since high school. They're friends from way back, somewhere in the South. I can't remember. I think it was South Carolina. Somebody in the chat will tell me. Okay, let's get into this.
That belief. It's somebody suffering from the long-term psychological effects of domestic violence. Who spent a lot of time? Dr. Brandon, you remember him. He was the first expert on trauma. Took some notes. Kevin Beck, you remember, did the direct examination of Dr. Brandon. He was from down in Miami, I think. He talked about the trauma, that you cannot escape from the abuse, so you develop coping skills to protect yourself, knowing that the bad things will happen to me. It changes your behavior, not only your behavior, but your thinking, your subjective thinking about fear and what to do. And if you remember, Dr. Brandon said it's all about that person's perception, okay? A lot of times they will self-medicate with alcohol or drugs. A A lot of times they suffer from anxiety. Basically, he said the trauma ends up being terror because you do not know what to expect. You do not know what is going to happen that night. It may be a great night. You may drink, and both of you have a great time. He falls asleep, passes out, you fall asleep, passes. But it may turn by, depending on his mood. I don't know if you could tell, she would try to placate him. Dr. Brandon said, you know, when you're trying to evaluate somebody, it takes time to get them to trust you. And the ultimate goal, he said, is to be a behavioral detective. If you're a forensic psychologist, is to be a behavioral detective. And the ultimate goal is to put yourself in the abused person's eyes so you can better understand their world. But ultimately, it's their perception of danger. Their perception of danger is what you have to look at. What a reasonable person would do under their perception of danger. Now, I want to go on. Trauma experts explain how victims' reactions in moments of stress are the product of the damaged psyche. Her actions, although tragic, and it was a tragedy, George Torres lost his life in that suitcase. It's a reactionary response to sustained trauma. It's as if Sarah was acting out of a deeply ingrained fear and helplessness developed over the years. So it's a desperate need for survival, but battered women do things to keep the peace from time to time. And when they feel like they have a small portion of momentary power, then they enjoy that by vocalizing their position to the abuser. Sarah Boone's not perfect. Sarah Boone would argue with him, talk down to him. Some would say was somewhat abusive to him. Sarah's not charged with that. Sarah Boone is not charged with that. And I want to read you something on that subject. Essentially,
this part is scary.
I'm gonna have to come back
He's
to it.
looking for the note
But
about
essentially
George
what it
being
said
the
was-
abused person.
Essentially what it said was eventually it's been a 2-week trial. I've got a bunch of notes. I'm trying to get this right. I know it's important. What I wanted to say was someone can be mean and angry and hateful, intoxicated, and still be abused.
So we're
They're
in
not mutually
agreement.
exclusive.
She was all of those things.
And mutual abuse exists where one is abusive towards another. And eventually the victim, Sarah Boone, trying to fight back against the abuse, became verbally abusive. While the victim has committed verbal abuse, it is important to remember that they, Sarah Boone, are the victim and have been pulled into an extremely vicious cycle where they are trying to survive.
Okay. The thing is, though, it's hard to say that she is the victim when she's alive, right? because if they're not, I just feel like they both can be victims of the DV, but he's the victim of this case, right? Or am I being pedantic?
Sarah Boone intentionally left George Torres in the suitcase, which was the act of a battered spouse syndrome woman. She went up to her room, she fell asleep, and passed out. These actions are disconnected.
Happy birthday.
Ultimately, she didn't let him out because of her fear that she knew.
All right. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Northwest. We're so glad that you're a part of our community. I always love seeing you in chat and hanging out and chat with you on other channels. Happy birthday to you. Thanks for being here with us.
If he got out in that moment, what he would do. That's real fear. That's real trauma that she was experiencing at that time. Now, I talked to you about force being used. And I think I talked to you about blocking an attack using a physical restraint like the suitcase to block somebody's attack. And the example I give, I got a couple of examples that may or may not apply. Let's say you're in a bar and you got your buddies and the other guy's got their buddies and they're drinking and it ends up being an argument between two of them. And you realize that these two are fixing to get in it. Well, one of your buddies comes around on the other side and grabs the guy before he's able to strike him, right? So you're committing an offense on this guy, but it's a restraint. It's a restraint where you grab him by the neck and try to get him out the bar. So yeah, you're committing an act, but it's designed to defend another, which is legal. Or let's say you have a situation where you have a police officer and he's on patrol. You know, he's in uniform, he's wearing a firearm, and of course he's got the bulletproof vest. And he goes to a call where there's a suspect that may be armed. A suspect that may be armed. And so he gets there, he gets out of the squad car, he's walking around. Of course, he's taking out his gun because he realizes he may be armed. And eventually he sees the suspect, and the suspect reaches for his waist. Now, in that moment in time, that officer has to make a decision.
Why did he use this example?
Am I going to help my family?
Parallel.
And I asked Dr. Werner about this Vaseline thing. It's called fear response or fight or flight. You know, those decisions are made, it's instinctive based on your set of circumstances. She instinctively reacted to her unique set of circumstances to save her life or save herself from another one of these. I'm 63. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that. Her father's not around.
There were other options. Call the police. He's in a suitcase.
I need to talk about the case a little bit. And if you remember, I'll go back here. If you'll remember, that's what place here.
Exactly, much of others. He used a very poor example. It's like, sure.
Let's start with the witnesses, and then I'll talk about sin. But the first witness out of the box for the state, if you remember, was Juan Torres, the brother. You remember that? It was some time ago. It's been a while. Y'all taking notes. You may have to go back. Their first witness was a good witness for us. Their first witness in their prosecution of Sarah Boone for murder was a good witness for us. Remember Tony Henderson did the cross-examiner of Juan Torres. Asked him, what did you hear Sarah Boone say? Juan Torres, she was yelling, he's been choking me. He's been choking me.
She's been tattling.
Mr.
Her
Henderson,
imaginary.
does it surprise you? Juan Torres said no. That family knew what was going on. The police knew what was going on. The neighbors knew what was going on. Pearl Walker came in here, 80-something years old,
Her.
working in jail. Kevin Beck called her up.
I wonder why
She
Pearl
saw it.
didn't come back for sentencing. What do you guys think?
Is there any doubt? Is there any doubt? I tell you why there's no doubt. In cross-examination, I got Dr. Warner to even admit. Did you hear it? Yes? Okay, Mr. Old. She suffers from battered spouse syndrome. Wouldn't have been go direct. Well, maybe I don't really know. I hadn't had enough time to really see her. You hadn't seen the pictures? You hadn't seen the 2-minute video? You've seen it one time earlier this month. One time. And she's going to start testifying about stuff she's never said before until she showed up in court? About, well, based on what she told me, I don't think she was an intimate figure? Come on. This is a courtroom. This is courtroom.
He looks like a bobblehead.
Okay, y'all
He's
here?
fed up. That's why
Thank
he's
you.
on like 1.5. He talks really slow.
But it gets even worse than that. It gets even worse than that here in this courtroom. The state attorney referred to these pictures. And I was going to rise up and
Overruled.
show these pictures to you.
Overruled. You may proceed.
And I was going to rise up and show these pictures to you. Well, yeah, I'm going to do that. They put her on trial for murder.
Like, you
But what did they
right.
say? And I got to turn to this. Make sure I get this exactly like they said it. I took a bunch of notes. Let me make sure I got this quote. Can't even find it. It was something to the effect, maybe George Torres is the battered spouse. Can you believe it? Can you believe that? Now you know why we're here.
Yes. We saw the videos.
Now you know why we're here.
Oh, wait, no, they haven't seen them all yet.
Little boys learn early on that girls are different. You do not put your hands,
The court
girl.
reporter.
you can't wrestle with them, you can't punch them, you can't kick them. You can't treat women that way. When you become adults, I don't care what she does to you. I don't care what she says to you. If she gets in your face, whatever she does, you do not have a right to hit a woman.
That's not correct.
No, sir.
You don't have a right to hit a man either. Let's not hit anybody.
What has the state attorney tried to do?
Objection, upper argument.
Sustained.
What has they done?
Objection.
What evidence have they tried to put on?
Overruled.
What evidence have they tried to paint Sarah as? What evidence? Controlled and manipulated were the words they used.
He went too hard on this. I mean, for me, justified their
This is
rebuttal.
2024.
Good morning, Pamela.
Why is that
Thank you.
relevant? What are they trying to claim? She provoked his violence? She provoked his violence. Isn't that what they've done here in this trial?
Upper argument.
Sustained.
Improper argument.
Let me get back on this. Abraham Marino. I don't know if you remember him. Abraham Marino changed his statement.
Maintenance man.
They took a statement from Abraham Marino in which Sarah stated, I don't know if you remember, but it was when the police were all there. I think they got the tape out, and some neighbors were coming around, and there were 2 or 3 neighbors sitting around. He said Sarah came out and stated it was an accident. Okay? Well, then, it was an accident. Abraham Marino knew George Torres from Philly. Okay? They were friends. They would talk either at the complex or if Marino went to Hall's Ace Hardware or Ace Hardware to talk. The state attorney notifies.
I'm going to object to reading from things that are not in evidence.
Approach.
Amen. Things that are not in evidence, they're not on the record. Slow your roll. I mean, I guess they could admit it to evidence, but they've got to go through that formality. But listen, I give it to Owens. He will get away with whatever you don't call him on. Do you know what I'm saying? What does that saying? A closed mouth don't get fed. Owens' mouth ain't never closed. Yeah. He seems really, I don't even know, like uncomfortable is not the word, like out of his depth. And I think he's an intelligent man. I'm not taking a dig at his intelligence, but in this moment in time, right, he just seems ill prepared to defend her. Like almost detached from reality. He's hitting on things that he shouldn't be hitting. Like sometimes, you wonder whose side he's on. It's like, although maybe he has a plan and then she redirects him, it's hard to tell. But sometimes he's not telling a cohesive story. Like, why did he go on about the police officer with the gun? And there was no gun. And even I think it annoyed me when Sarah was on the stand and she said she made a split-second decision. What are you talking about, ma'am? You went upstairs and went to sleep. It takes more than a split second to get up the stairs. Like, but somehow, I know you guys said he gave her a book and there was some, like, somehow in her mind that all makes sense. Yeah. It just was, I gotta imagine they're gonna teach this case in law schools, right? Like, it's such an odd set of circumstances. And she had the chance to go free. No genital check required. Wait a minute. You treat people. You can't treat people. Right. Exactly. There isn't something like magical about a penis that says you can be hit 1,000,000 times, or something magical about a vagina that says, you know what I mean? Like, what? Like, let's just teach kids not to hit. Let's do that. Little boys and little girls and little non-gender norm children. Let them keep their hands to themselves, become emotionally mature, learn to communicate. You know, how productive will they be in life if they can communicate well and not just...
You may proceed.
Right?
So 4.5 years, Marino says, all I heard Sarah say that afternoon was it was an accident. And then he came in here today, or this week and said, no, she said I was teaching him a lesson, things got out of hand, and then I fell asleep. 4.5 years later, we know he's friends with Torres.
So he would make that up?
Now, I want to talk to you about the 2 boys that live right next door. You remember Vincent Battaglia and Brandon Motes? Remember those guys? And you remember it came out in testimony, this event happened on February 23rd of 2020. But it came out in the testimony that Sarah had said, George Torres,
I think so.
the night before, February 22nd of 2020, grabbed me by my hair and pulled me down the stairs in my apartment from top to bottom, which is consistent with what they were saying happened, remember? But they got the dates wrong. And remember, Mr. Henderson called Deputy Copsel, or Detective Copsel, up in our case, and she had to say, yeah, I didn't take their 2 statements until the 27th, February the 27th, remember? So they were going back, and they both had similar stories. Of course, they had time to talk by then, the 27th. I think the only recorded interviews they got that the night of this event, February 23rd, was from Sarah Boone and her ex-husband, Brian Boone, right? So they came back following up on the 27th. That's when they got a statement from Brandon Motes.
The thing with that is, though, they had very clear timelines. So irrespective of separate timelines, they weren't together, right? So irrespective of if they spoke or not, they couldn't rewrite where they were, what time they worked. Like the one guy said he was off at like 2, or he went in at whatever, had odd hours, and so his schedule was very specific. So it's not like talking to his roommate would have changed that timeline. You know what I mean? Like, so the fact that they're questioning, is Sarah a more reliable narrator than those two students? It's the two students. Just based on the totality of what the jury has seen, like that. Or am I like too, what do you guys think?
And Vincent attacked And at that time, they said, yeah, we heard that sound. You remember Sarah testifying? No, that was the night before. I complained about that. And I think one of them had testified. Yes, she had said something about being drugged down the night before. It may have been, can't remember now who it was. One of them. And, you know, it looked like that there may be some implication that Sarah got him in the suitcase and pushed him downstairs. But I think we didn't have anything before that. Remember? And then this photograph, which we introduced, which shows the bottom of the stairs. As you can see, there's Lucas's bookshelf, right? This is where Sarah Bennett stored Lucas's stuff. And you can see it's not disturbed at all.
She had how many hours?
Anyway,
Maybe that's
I'll get back to Sarah.
what she didn't answer.
About that. But let me talk a little bit about the law. Unjustifiable use of force is legal and lawful if you reasonably believe, I think y'all probably already understand it by now, if you reasonably believe it was necessary to prevent imminent threat to harm. The law is crucial, ensuring that individuals can safeguard themselves in potentially dangerous situations. By acknowledging you have a right to defend yourself when you have a reasonable belief that force is necessary to prevent an attack. Okay? What did Mr. Henderson say in jury selection? You don't have to wait. You do not have to wait. If you're facing, in your mind, a reasonable imminent threat, you don't have to wait. Let's talk about Sarah Boone and this unconventional form of physical restraint to block the attack of George Torres. What did she say? Assault. Now, you got to think about that. You got to think about what was going on. You got to think about the trauma she was undergoing. You got to think about they've both been drinking, and you got to think about the fact that it was all fun and games for a while. And I think the biggest thing to know is that George Torres chose to get into this case. He's a grown man. That was his choice. She didn't force him in at gunpoint to get into that suitcase. He voluntarily got into that suitcase because they were drunk and being silly and stupid.
We don't know that, though. We only have Sarah's word that he got in.
Zipped him up, they were laughing.
First call, she said, I
And as
put
you know,
him in
Sarah
the
left the videotape on. And I know you've seen some of these videos and you're wondering why, but I think the evidence shows that when George is being videotaped, he's not going to do anything. If you think about that, when George is being videotaped, that's like her power. Dr. Harper said that Sarah's words are her power. Sarah's words are her power. Physically, she's no match for George. Physically, she's no match. But that's her power, so knows. And she gets a chance, when she gets a chance to have some control, that's what she does. And she videotapes, because she knows when she's videotaping, she can tell it like it is. I can tell him what I want to tell him. A couple of these videos you've seen, she's telling him like it is. But she's got that video camera on, and George knows. He's being videoed. We've got one we're going to show you in a minute before he loses it. Just a little bit. Right there. And of course, we got the TV. But they're kidding around, playing around. Then, Sarah realizes, okay, this is my chance to say something to him. So she sits down, she turns on the phone, and you've seen the tape. You've seen the tape. For everything you've done to me, are the first words out of Sarah's mouth when the video begins. There's a lot packed into those words. Think about that. For everything you've done to me. This is how it feels when you choke me. Now that's in direct response as a result of the abuse that she suffered at the hands of George Torres. She wants him, for that moment, to feel how she feels. She wants, for that moment, to feel for him to feel how she feels, how uncomfortable, the lack of control that she feels when George is violent with her. Just for a moment, she won't be able to do that. And if you can imagine,
Approach.
I think from the evidence, you can determine she was crazy about that. She was crazy about that. And I don't know if, of course, it's a syndrome, but she felt like she couldn't do without it. And let's say she videotapes it, and then it's turned off. And there's a 9-minute gap, 11-minute gap, whatever it is. I said 11, they're saying 9, but I think if you count 2 of the other minutes. But there's 9 minutes that we don't have video. But what did Sarah say? Now, if you remember when you listen on that video, George is talking in a normal voice. He's not stressed. Of course, if you're talking, you can breathe. She had said she had some air. And of course, she doesn't realize the situation, that it's going to end the way it ends. So she has no appreciation of that. It's a canvas. All she knows is an old canvas suitcase. And she's got some, the 2 zippers removed or spread out a little bit. So she thinks he's not being serious. But eventually he gets angry. She gets angry, he gets angry. He says words to her, and then his hand starts to come out of the suitcase. She also said his tone changed.
I thought it was.
And I know everybody's got a cadence with their spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, but you know what I'm talking about. We've got a way of talking to people. We've got a way, your wife, your husband, you know each other. You know, when they come in from work, what kind of mood they're in. Just by a couple of things, the way you just sense it, right? Well, especially somebody as hypervigilant as Sarah and as hypervigilant as a battered spouse woman would realize that he can flip the switch at any time. When I get out of here, I'm going to end you. And he realizes he's getting out. He got his hand out. At that moment in time, in Sarah's mind, that's an imminent threat. So she's got a justifiable right to use force. What did she do? She went over there and grabbed it. She lifted it up. She tried to get his hand back in, remember? She tried to get his hand to go back in. When he go back in, so her son's back. Was when the police found it the next morning, same spot. No attempts to hide. No attempts to delete phone. No attempts to tamper with evidence. Nothing. In the same spot as it was. She picks up the bat. She pokes. She pokes him hard, trying to get him to stop trying to get out. And eventually he does. And you've seen the blunt force injuries. And you saw some of the circular injuries where you can tell there's a poking. I think it's right around here. And she poked him several times. You remember the pathologist said, I think, maybe 5, 6, or 7 times. She pokes him. And he's got some scratches. I don't know if they'll let you look at it, but on the back of that suitcase, it's got some bars, some metal bars that are inside the lining. There's a lining, and it's for support when you walk in there. She testified. You heard what she said, that she was justified. That's uncontroverted testimony. Now, let's talk about the jury instructions just for a minute. And, I want to talk about reasonable doubt for a minute. And they're fun things, but I've got one. If you find it. If y'all are looking. I think it's on page 15 or 26. We're going to talk about it without a minute. If you look at the bottom where you see a paragraph, is the evidence introduced in this trial indicate alone that you're to look for the evidence or look for that proof? A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant may arise from the evidence itself, a conflict in the evidence, or lack of evidence. But here's the main thing. And, obviously, I represent her, and I'm trying my best to show you honestly and fairly the doubt in this case. And 5 reasonable doubts, 17 reasonable doubts, 25 reasonable doubts. You have to have 1 reasonable doubt. I'm trying to show you throughout the evidence that each one of you can have a different reasonable doubt, difference, but 1 reasonable doubt about the state's case, and your verdict is not guilty according to me. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean proof beyond all doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, speculative doubt, or imaginary or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. And this is a deeply held belief. Reasonable doubt is the highest standard we recognize as litigation. Car wreck or something like that is for fun, so the evidence standard 51%. You're entitled. Abiding conviction, that's a deeply held belief that you must have if you're thinking about something. That's a firm belief. It's a level of certainty that you have. That's what you gotta have as a juror. I've got to be certain of her guilt. If on the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, which we want you to do, there is not an abiding conviction of guilt, so I'm not certain. I'm not certain of her guilt. Or if you have a conviction, I think there's some evidence of guilt, but it is one that is not stable, one which wavers and vacillates. One which wavers and vacillates. Then the charge is not proved beyond a reasonable doubt, and you should find that someone not guilty because the doubt is reasonable. You understand that? You've got to be certain of guilt. That's the high standard we recognize. If you've got some evidence of guilt, so okay, there's some evidence for conviction, but it's not it's not stable. It wavers and vacillates. Then under our system, you've got a reasonable doubt. And you've got the power and authority and the obligation under the law, if that's the way you feel, to vote that way. Later in the instruction, it goes on. It's up to you to decide what evidence is reliable. You should use your common sense in deciding which is the best evidence and which evidence should not be relied upon in considering your verdict. You may find some of the evidence not reliable or less reliable than other evidence. You may rely on your own conclusion about the credibility of a witness. That is totally the province of the jurors to decide that. A juror may believe or disbelieve any or all the part of the evidence of the testimony of any witness. I want to show you this before I begin. But Dr. Warner said, this is their expert again. He testified that Sarah Boone suffers from battered stop syndrome. Battered women's experiences affect her perception of imminent danger. Those past experiences with George Torres, and there's a bunch, affect their perception. Remember, Michael Brandon talked about perception of imminent danger. Victims of repeat violence may fear death in situations others would not. The reason Sarah experiences all this, the reason she was feeling the way she was feeling, that imminent threat of danger from George, was because of George Torres. George Torres is responsible for her mental state because of the way he has violently treated her. She reacted to his attempts to get out because of the way he treated her and the way she knows what is he going to do if he gets out of the suitcase? She knows. The second video is played. She's flipped it back upside right. You hear him, it's 22 seconds. He says, Sarah, she's not going to open that suitcase.
I wondered about that,
She's not going to open that suitcase. He's already threatened her.
Block the name.
She used the bat to get him to stop trying to get out of it. Why would she do that? Why would she do that? I know what he's going to do. I know what he's going to do to me. I know him like I know him more than he knows himself. I know what he's going to do to me. You don't have to wait. That was justifiable. Now, you got to understand this. She intentionally used the bat to defend herself. She intentionally didn't unzip it to defend herself. Both of those are lawful under our law. She went upstairs. The dogs were upstairs. At some point, she called her husband, her ex-husband, Brian Boone. We know that many times she testified, or somebody in court said, she would often flee to her ex-husband's house sometimes. I believe that testimony came out. Maybe Sarah or somebody. That sometimes she would flee, or sometimes she would flee to upstairs. One of those two. But the dogs were up there. She made a phone call. At some point, she fell asleep, passed out, fell asleep. We don't know. They had 2 big bottles of wine. Right? That was unintentional. That was unintentional. His death was unintentional. You remember when she was in the you remember that? Now, I did a good job of this, but it came out that she got arrested. You remember the one time when she got the black eye? She got arrested for strangulation. And you remember that? They ended up over there by the dryer, and he was banging her back of her head on the floor that has very little carpet on it. And she ended up getting her arms out, and then she grabbed his neck. And she eventually got him off of her. And that's when he got up and stomped her in the eye. Remember? Well, the police came for that event, and they took statement, and Sarah was honest with the officers about what all, and they arrested her. You remember? Remember that? They arrested her.
Remember?
And she said, why? I was fighting back. You remember that? Why? I was fighting back.
Remember? Anybody remember?
So from that point on, she didn't trust law enforcement. The video that they showed a while ago about George, that was about dropping the case, where she was defending herself and fighting back. want to talk about this investigation by law enforcement. Now, she didn't know the law. She's not a lawyer. She gets up the next morning. Brian's calling. Sarah's got to pick up Lucas at 3. Brian's calling. Eventually she walks down. She's looking for George. Where's George? He's quiet down there. Then she looks in the bathroom. She looks out and smokes a cigarette. He's on the computer. She sees the suitcase. And you can imagine.
Objection, call the roll.
Sustained.
She sees him in the suitcase. She can't. What did she do? What she do? She tries to
You said
get
he
the fiance
reacted?
out of the suitcase.
That's bad. And
They're
for the
engaged.
jury,
She's not trying to kill him. They're engaged to be married. She gets him out. She tries to do. He's purple. She tries her best to do CPR. She doesn't. You heard her. I didn't know what to do. I didn't call Brian. That's her safety valve. That's all she's got. Brian eventually says she's come over. She calls again in 2 minutes. I'm on the way. He gets there. You got to call 911. Man told her before. Call 911. She calls 911. She tries to do CPR again. Is she busy trying to hide evidence? She busy trying to hide evidence? She busy trying to hide the fact? No, she's trying to save his life. If she can. So the police get there. She knows if she told him she fought back, she's going to be arrested. That's what happened before. What happened before? Like George has said on the video, she'd never been arrested before. Before that time, she was charged with that with George. She lies. She lies. She's scared. She's scared.
so this is where I don't know if he's intentionally being dishonest, but this is when Sarah strangled him. He was going up the stairs and he kicked her in the eye. It's in the police report. And she was arrested for strangulation, which is a felony. And it's a precursor to murdering your victim. The story that he's telling, I know she told that on the stand, but that is not what she told the police in that body-worn camera. So, is he required to tell the truth?
She doesn't know what to do. So she lies. She makes a decision to lie. Don't trust law enforcement. She doesn't know the law. She doesn't call a lawyer. She talked to Officer Rodriguez, was the first short black female the first one that arrived again. Talks to her. There's a recording statement there where she doesn't tell the whole story. She lies. And then the detectives eventually get there and get her in the squad car. You hear the audio. I think it was played. She lies again. Then the next day, she goes down to the sheriff's department. Now, if they would have told her, hey, I'm going to arrest you, and she gets a lawyer to go down there to make a statement, the lawyer would advise her.
Objection, facts on evidence.
Sustained.
Move strike.
Stricken. The jury will pay no mention or give any weight to that statement.
She's not a lawyer. She didn't have a lawyer present when she made this statement. She didn't know the law. She didn't know she was justified in defending herself the way she did in this dysfunctional, toxic, abusive relationship. I don't know if you remember, it was a 2-hour video, but there was some things she said, not intentional. And eventually, she wanted the detective, it was Detective Lowe, the male detective. And she said, I swear to you on my son's life, it was not intentional. What she was talking about was that George passed, was that George died. That was not intentional. She thought he was fine in there. He sobered up. We've learned from their history, when Sarah gets drunk, she calls for help. When George gets drunk, he beats Sarah. That's their pattern. How many times did we see Sarah call along? That's their pattern. Sarah told me, I didn't know, I think she said, I didn't know something like this could happen. I've never done it before. And Detective Lowen said, well, what did you expect was going to happen? I got a daughter that she was about 18 or 19. She got a grandmother's hand-me-down pickup truck. It was an older truck, but she didn't have it long, and she was gassing it up, but she didn't put any oil in it. Eventually, it darked them up. And you don't know what you don't know. I hadn't done a good job of explaining, hey, you got to put oil in it too. Sarah Boone didn't know that he could die in there. It's an old beat-up canvas suitcase that she left a gap in. And as naive as that sounds,
So
didn't
she
appreciate
wasn't in imminent danger?
I mean, is that the way you want to kill somebody? Is that the way you're going to do it? She had Lucas to take care of it. I'm not going to go to prison doing it like this. No attempt to hide the crime. I think the evidence is clear. That's how this happened. I don't want to belabor the point. I do want to show you. Just quickly show you the image. See how got stabbed? Think about that. Stabbed with a steak knife in the leg. And she stayed with him. She stayed with him. Poked between the eyes with a curtain rod.
What
Stalked
did he say?
in the eye. And who does that? The law empowers an individual to defend their life and safety when faced with a threat and to prevent an attack. That's what Sarah Boone did. That's what Sarah Boone did. I think it's important to understand Sarah had to be the parent a lot of times. It was her place. She had that $1,000 a month from the divorce settlement coming in. She had the car. She had the phone. She had the key. She had to be the parent in a lot of ways.
And the aggressor. She had all the power and control.
I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Harper. Do you remember, Dr. Harper is from Okaloosa County, which is up in the Panhandle, close to where we're from. And she's the doctor that treated Sarah from early on. Whether this happened in 2020, I think she first saw Sarah Boone shortly thereafter. And over the 4.5 years, saw her 9 times and did all the testing for post-traumatic stress. Of course, she has the experience from the veterans, and she's testified that she's now just traveling around the state, testifying as a forensic psychologist. But she talked about how important it is to develop trust with the patient over a course of time. It's just going to take time when you have somebody suffering that kind of trauma and that kind of damaged psyche. It's going to take some time to get them where they can trust you and really tell you and talk to you and tell you what's going on with you. And she talked about, that Sarah uses her words for power. I think her testimony, I think the evidence supports that her testimony was credible.
Objection.
The evidence supports that her testimony was
Objection
credible.
is sustained.
I can't get my person. Okay. The evidence supports that her testimony was credible because of the time that she spent, because of the number of tests that she did. She diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, alcohol use disorder, I think an anxiety disorder, and battered spouse syndrome. Dr. Warner confirmed that. And Dr. Michael Brandon, the first witness, he was brought in as a subject matter expert. So he hadn't treated Sarah. He was just testifying about the condition. He's been doing it a long time. He's an expert at it. And that's to advise you to try to understand what's going on. And as crazy as it sounds, in this syndrome, they try to protect the abuser. They're in love with them. They try to protect them. I don't know if you remember that there was a time where Sarah Boone had a conversation with one of the neighbors and they were talking about something. She said, "Did you hear anything yet last night?" Remember, she said, "Shh, it's okay." Both George and Sarah lied to police. They lied to medical people. I don't know if it's shame. It just comes with the syndrome that you stay trapped in it. I think another big, if you think about this, when Sarah gets beaten by George, she calls the police. When Sarah gets beaten by George, she calls the police. And a lot of times she just wants him out. Just get him out. get him to leave. She doesn't want him to get in trouble. She just wants him out. There never was a report of George calling the police on Sarah. She wasn't physically abusing him. The state is trying to present evidence that she emotionally abused him.
Sustained. Stricken. Members of the jury will pay no attention to that comment. Give it no weight whatsoever.
I believe the evidence that's been presented by the state is an attempt to show that Sarah mentally or emotionally abused George Torres. Again, she's not charged with that. She's not perfect. Some of that was her trouble. In Sarah's situation, you do become numb and hard-headed, I think, over time. That's a coping mechanism. It's a day-to-day thing, some good days, some, But the homicide detectives, I don't know if you saw that 2-hour video. At some point in the 2-hour video, they started talking about some of the violence. They go, they already checked with neighbors or whoever. They knew. The neighbors knew. Police officers knew who responded. Torres' family knew. They all knew about the abuse. Dr. Harper testified that abused women act differently when they perceive a threat. I think Sarah Boone was loyal to a fault to George, even through all the abuse. Judge, I want to make a comment about a couple of things that were said by the prosecutor in opening statement.
You actually,
The prosecutor in opening statement, when he was talking about George Torres passing away, he started talking about Sarah Boone. And his quote was, going to write down, George, in Sarah Boone's mind, George Torres deserved it. George Torres deserved it. That's the position of the devil. He deserved to die. She loved the man. She wasn't trying to kill him. He also commented about
yes.
She's PO. Look how red her nose is. Yeah, it's a weird closing statement because it's a weird defense. I mean, he had bad facts, right? Like, I don't know what you say. I don't know why she didn't take the deal. You can't hear me? Is that, Testing. If you had used her goal, you'd be on the same path that she is. So thank your lucky stars that you had better sense. No. Okay, thank you. I'm like, I just see the numbers popping up. Let's just see. Let me skip ahead.
about the violence, the violent episodes. It's a bunch of violent nonsense. What's his statement to you in opening statement? All this here, before the rest, is a bunch of violent nonsense. You'll have to make your mind up for it. There were a couple of exhibits that I introduced late, and they were no contact provisions. Were there in a court order from a judge, not only a verbal order, but it was reduced to writing. So there was a court order for George Torres not to have any contact with Sarah. Okay. Court system got involved. We'd have no contact with George Torres. Now, I need to talk a little bit about that.
That was later modified to like no hospital contact.
Power control. Power control. We know about his abuse. We know he destroyed the home, the TV. We know about his jealousy. We know some of the things he said to her. We know about how he treated her dogs. Nicely when he was sober, but at times he abused the dogs or threatened to do so. If you think about power control, when you're controlling a person, and I think she testified that he kind of smothered her, always around her. Part of his fear was her realizing that she had enough and to leave it for good. That she'd get the strength over time if she had enough time away from him, where she wasn't in control of it and he wasn't in control of it. enough time away, she would come to her senses and realize she could do better. Judge, you've been getting pointed all week. I didn't stop George Torres. George Torres knew he was going to lose control. And she had a bunch of time away from him. She might move on. He was willing to violate a court order to maintain control. That's George Torres. I want to show a couple of videos. I'll say something to you. Show me if you're just going to. If we get in the light. Yes.
Do you understand? As of this moment, and until I can get you out, get the fuck out of here. I dare you.
Did you see
Yeah,
this?
look, okay. Wait, stay away from me. Get away from me. Get away from me. I'm gonna scream bloody murder. I'm gonna scream bloody murder.
Did you see him flip the switch? In that instance? Where he lost it? Even though the video was going. Show the next one. Thank you, Judge. You turn it off. You turn it off.
Carefully curated. You notice how they edited both of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to finish up right here. And Sarah Boone, I've gotten to know.
Objection. Not argued.
Sustained.
Sarah Boone is like any other citizen. Equal justice under the law. She should be treated like any other citizen. Fairly and impartially. Based on the circumstances she was facing at the time of this tragedy. Based on the battered spouse instruction, which is a special instruction that's given when women have a heightened sense of fear and trauma, that you're utilizing in applying her subjective standard to the reasonable standard of what a reasonable person would do under her circumstances, and using the force that she used to defend herself. I'm glad this is it. I try my best. Sarah Boone fought back and survived.
Don't
We ask that you do justice in this case and find her not guilty because the doubt is reasonable. I tried to show you where the doubt was. I trust your judgment. You spent a long time picking the jury 4 days. We trust you. We appreciate your service and your obligation to do your duty. You have the power and authority to right this wrong. That's what we're asking you to do. And give Sarah Boone some hope for a better life and freedom.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, George Torres is dead because the defendant believed he deserved to be zipped shut in a suitcase so that she could make him feel how she felt when he cheated on her, when he choked her, and to hold him there as a captive audience, according to her testimony. Now he has to listen to me. Well, right out of the gate, there are credibility issues. Cheating to me means viewing pornography. Well, we saw cheating really means women. And the heated conversation on June 14th about these women in Facebook. And that is what leads to the arrest on June 15th. These outpouring, Candy Crush, all the bizarre things that you see in your phone. He uses the legal system as a weapon at times. There's no denying that they are engaging in violent behavior. And it is over nonsense. It is smashing TVs. They call the police and then they're standing there looking bewildered about what to do and who to say and laughing and joking. Ladies and gentlemen, the courtroom is a place for justice, not a suitcase. The reason we have a jury system originally started with the idea that the king, the crown in England, shouldn't be able to go and incarcerate citizens on his whim. So it developed into a system where citizens would have to say, yes, you can take our fellow citizen. But the opposite is also true. A citizen cannot take another citizen's life because he or she feels like it. That likewise requires a jury to decide that it was objectively reasonable for a person of ordinary prudence and caution. Like Mr. Cacciatore argued earlier, battered spouse syndrome is not a license to kill. Past grievances, even being stabbed in the leg, so on and so forth, do not give her the license to kill. There are still laws in place about when and how this can be done in a justifiable manner. I want to talk about the most important jury instruction in this case that has not been discussed very well, or thoroughly. the use of deadly force is not justified if you find that Sarah Boone used force to initially provoke the threatened use of force against herself. And we'll stop at that comment. The facts of the case that came from her own mouth, if she is to be believed, and we will explore thoroughly why you should disregard every bit of her testimony, from court to the detectives to the 911 operator to the doctors. Her testimony, if it is to be believed, the most favorable light that she has presented of herself, is that at the end of a Sunday fun day, where we are drinking, we're outside by the dartboard, we're doing puzzles, we're doing arts and crafts, and there finally comes a point in time where we're gonna play hide and seek. And he says, tag, you're it. Even though she's it, she goes upstairs, hides in the shower, eventually gets tired of being there, it's cold, so on and so forth, and she comes back downstairs. And as she comes back downstairs, she can see Mr. Torres fiddling to place himself inside the suitcase to try and hide for this game. And the lid is not closed, it's flapping. And out of jest, out of levity, undisputed according to her testimony, she comes over there and zips it shut. Whether it's 100% or enough for 2 fingers to get out, that is something that you decide as the jury. But there came a point in time where the fun and games was over. And Mr. Torres told her that. Babe, I can't breathe. Sarah, babe, let me out. This is all in video. We don't have to imagine this. This is all in video, 1062. At that point in time, she is using force against him that is not justified. She is the initial provocateur. She is the aggressor under the law. And what level of force is it? I can't breathe. Not let go of my hand, not get your hands off me. I can't breathe. This is no different than 2 people, maybe they're buddies at the bar, similar to an example given by Mr. Owen, who are wrestling, and one has another one in a headlock. And there comes a point in time where the person on the receiving end of the headlock says, that's enough, I'm tapping. George Torres was tapping, and she ignored it. And she was kind enough to tell you why. Out of anger, which translates to hatred, ill will, spite, just like that in jury instruction for second-degree murder. She told you exactly why. She got angry. Him saying, I can't breathe, babe, was what triggered her. Not a fear of imminent harm. Those are her own words. That is the law. These are the 2 paragraphs that solve this equation without getting up on a big whiteboard in college that's 30 feet long, 15 feet high, and a ladder, and somebody's scribbling Latin words and Greek letters for months and months to solve this huge, complicated equation. The equation is solved in 2 paragraphs. She is the initial aggressor. He is saying, I can't breathe. It is no different than a naked chokehold that she does not let go of. And she told you it's because I want him to listen to me. This is my bully pulpit. This is how he made me feel in the past. She doesn't describe it as teaching him a lesson, but that's exactly what she says. I want him to feel like I felt in the past. I want to tell him things. Ladies and gentlemen, we can play semantical games, but that is teaching him a lesson. Therefore, we have to look at the other 2 paragraphs. Because right now, plain as day, the use of deadly force is not justified if you find that Sarah Boone used force to initially provoke the threat and use of force against herself. And what force are we talking about? Well, the threat of force that she tells you she was facing was him fighting for survival. Him sticking his fingers out of the suitcase. Him sticking his hand out. That is the threat of force, coupled with, I'm going to end you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, she is the initial provocateur. She is the one using deadly force against him. If I have somebody in a rear naked chokehold, they are entitled to use deadly force against me to break that chokehold, at least until we're separated. He had every right to say what he said. He had every right to exist and stick his hand out and try and survive to breathe another day. However, the use of force is not justified if you find that Sarah Boone used the force to initially provoke the threatened use of force against herself, unless she does one of 2 things. And she did neither. Not even close. The threat of force asserted towards the defendant was so great that she reasonably believed that she was in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. All right, let's give her absolutely every benefit of the doubt, which you should. This is a criminal prosecution. The state of Florida has alleged she committed murder. You need to do everything you can to look for reasonable doubt. But a reasonable doubt is not an imaginary doubt, forced doubt, speculative doubt. So accepting that all of their past history, accepting the doctor's testimony and the limitations on what they reviewed compared to what we reviewed. We did a much more thorough review of the relationship than any of the doctors did in this case. So let's give her that first clause. Because of their past relationship, with George now fighting for his right to exist and saying that he will end her if he gets out, we'll give her that.
Time zone. Happy New Year. Lisa, I highlighted you at 1, but I didn't stop for Happy New Year. But Happy New Year for the next time zone. Yes.
But just like Mr. Cacciatore mentioned earlier, lawyers, words mean things to us, and they mean things to everybody, but really to us. Or an and. There's an and. Had exhausted every reasonable means to escape the danger other than using deadly force on George Torres. She did not use every reasonable means to escape the danger that now, after provoking him, that he was presented to her, according to her. She didn't pick up her cell phone and start walking, call 911. She didn't do anything other than, if you believe that is why she called Brian Boone, made a phone call to Brian Boone, and unfortunately, because of past history, he just ignored her phone call. She did not exhaust every reasonable means to escape this danger that she created. She started it. She created this. Other than using the deadly force on George Torres. Now, this is a weird situation. This is not a rear naked chokehold. This is a suitcase, or as Mr. Cacciatore said, a box, or actually more aptly described it as a coffin. And when you secure somebody into a box or a coffin, you can still exert that deadly force on them from a distance. I'll give you a quick example from a couple of movies that I love. In 1977 in May, a movie came out called Star Wars. They eventually called it Episode 4. In the first scene, there is this large, imposing figure that wears black armor. He is a government agent, and he is looking for some stolen classified documents. He picks a man up who he believes is responsible for this treachery and breaks his neck and chokes him to death when he doesn't tell him where the plans are. We all understand that. That is direct force we all understand. But what we need to understand is the force she's exerting from the couch. And then when she goes up to bed, she is still exerting that force on him. She set these implementations into motion and did not stop. So later in this movie that came out in 1977, another co-employee of this dark, imposing figure, Vader, insults his religion. He does not go to HR. He takes matters into his own hands and chokes this person from a distance. Ironically, while we're talking about force, it's the force. And then in the subsequent movie, he's like doing it from his office. He's killing his incompetent employees on different ships. Force, deadly force, can be exerted from a distance in this situation. So whether she's on the couch or whether she turns in for bed, she is still using that deadly force on him. She has not exhausted every reasonable means to escape this danger. Do something. You started this. You put him in the position where he cannot breathe. She's required by law to do something about it. Not something, everything. There was no efforts in this case. None. Or, in good faith, Sarah Boone withdrew from physical contact with George Torres and clearly indicated to George Torres that she wanted to withdraw and stop the use of deadly force. But George Torres continued or resumed the threatened use of force. That did not happen. She never withdrew from physical contact. She is still, like Vader, choking him from the couch, choking him from bed. She never withdrew that force. Physical contact includes any restraint on George Torres' movements. She never indicated that she wanted to withdraw. Sarah, babe, I can't breathe. All right, if I let you out, are you going to come out peacefully? Since I started this, I'm the one that made you not be able to breathe. That didn't happen. So ladies and gentlemen, this entire analysis about deadly force starts and ends there. She was the provocateur. These are her obligations when she starts it. She put him in fear of death. He is literally telling her, I cannot breathe.
Good call, Peg.
A couple other things about the law. Second-degree murder does not require proof of intent to kill. Argument was made repeatedly that she didn't intend to kill him. That has never been the state's suggestion. Because why would we suggest we prove something that we don't have to? It's not her subjective belief. Well, Sarah Boone doesn't believe that this suitcase can kill him, even though he's repeatedly said, I can't breathe. That's a person of ordinary judgment who would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another. A person of ordinary judgment who hears, I can't breathe, babe, Sarah, and his voice gets weaker 9 minutes later. You're on notice. This is statutory notice. Done from ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent. Her words speak for herself. This was not out of fear. This was out of hatred and anger. Born out of all those horrible things that has been done to her and done to him. Understand, we're not going to belabor the past. Is of such neighbor that act.
Welcome to the membership, Shintai. Thank you. Hopefully I said that
I don't
right.
care that you're saying you can't breathe. Fuck you. That's my name. Don't wear it out. Fuck you. It's second-degree murder. We do not have to prove the intent to kill. We have to. She intended the act. She intended the act of zipping him shut. She continued to intend that act when he said, I can't breathe. That act resulted in his death. That's a manslaughter, but then when you add in the hatred, ill will, spite, and the depraved mind, that's what makes it second-degree murder. And that 2-minute video is the textbook definition of depraved mind as we define it here in Florida. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense. You cannot feel sorry for her because they had 2 1.5-liter bottles of wine and then some from the leftovers from the day before. And quite frankly, she's blackout drunk. She's blackout drunk. She doesn't remember making the videos. She turns her phone over right to the deputy the next day because she doesn't know what's on it. She doesn't remember doing it. Another thing that we just haven't talked about much is her story. She can't be up in the shower hiding and taking a picture at 11:03 p.m., 9 minutes before the video. That portion of her story just doesn't add up.
And what it shows is it's more like 20 minutes instead of 11 or 12 minutes that we know he's trapped in what turns out to be his coffin. Let's talk about her testimony at trial. And we'll talk about all the problems. A lot of her issues predated her relationship with Mr. Torres. So it's not attributable to the trauma from Mr. Torres with all the luggage she brought into the relationship. And listen to the way she talks. It's not splitting the bills. It's helping without argument. It's not cleaning up and doing Sunday chores. It's cleaning up so we can relax. It's a reward. She talks about him like he's a child. I need to lead him to the next activity from one to the other. And then you saw all the videos, and I'm not going to belabor it, that we showed in rebuttal, but the relationship and the power dynamics speak for itself. He was treated like the third dog. And it might very well have been a dog that bit and was violent, but he was treated like a dog. Why are you leaning against my door? Get out of here. Go downstairs. You're worthless. You're garbage. They showed the part of the video where he slaps the phone, but that's after 5 or 6 minutes of being berated and dehumanized in a way that nobody should be treated. He just wanted to get in bed and lay down next to his fiance. Instead, get away from the side of my door, you useless dog. I thought it might be a good point in time to listen to the music. You know, when does Mr. Torres get to decide what to do? I mean, she paints this picture that he goes off and does all these things on his own, goes and buys wine when he's not supposed to, does all these things when he's not supposed to, but when does he get to do what he wants? Suitcase downstairs for a week so they can donate it. What was in their lives that was preventing them from getting that suitcase to Goodwill or whatever? Neither one of them worked. What's going on? Lucas is over there on Mondays and Tuesdays. The story about the suitcase having already been down there is quite suspect, and we'll get into that more. But again, it's not we went on a trip together, we had a great time. It's I quote unquote, I recently took him on a trip. Then it comes down to the moment of truth, which we've already gone over. And it's just quite frankly inconsistent, because there's no explanation for the picture. Her explanation at trial when I brought it up to her was, I just don't remember. I don't remember this period in time from the picture at 11:03 to when I was supposed to be coming down the stairs. There's a major glitch in her matrix. She shakes the suitcase. Please stop doing this to me. And then his hand gets out. Now she's at the point in time when she gets angry and doesn't do what the law requires after basically choking him with his coffin. Beats him into submission with the bat and turns it back over. For the first time ever at trial, she says, I'm going to fucking end you, is what he said. She never told that to even her doctors. We've heard the arguments why she didn't tell the truth to the police and all that. And there's a lot of truth into the argument that was made. There's a lot of truth. When the argument is made that she didn't understand self-defense, what that means, what it comes across as, she makes this story change as she learns about it. When we apply her statement, all 6 of them apply against her.
Northwest, I hope your fur baby has settled down.
Fireworks discussed
can be
earlier. But did the witness have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testified? Even at trial, she admitted that she was intoxicated for the first time. She went back and forth with the police about whether or not she was intoxicated and her standard of drunkenness and whatnot. But she was so intoxicated that she still felt the effects of it at 1 PM the following day. The medical examiner told you that alcohol dissipates in the average person. Everybody's different, tolerance, all sorts of things come into play. But on average, 0.015 grams per deciliter will dissipate every hour. So you can do the math. 0.015 times 14 puts her at 2.5 times the legal limit. For those reasons alone, you should not believe anything she told you. You should not believe anything she told the police. You should not believe anything she told the doctors. She was at 2.5 times the legal limit. She has a gap in her memory that's unexplained when I brought up the photograph at 11:03. You can't have it both ways. I don't remember 11:03 to 11:12, but I was upstairs in the shower hiding. Does the witness seem to have an accurate memory? Well, this ties into what we're talking about. But again, there's a glitch in the matrix, 11:03 to 11:12. Her memory is not accurate. By her own admission, I don't remember. She tells the police when they show her the video, I don't remember that happening. Was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? I submit when we got off script, and by we, I mean with both attorneys, she wasn't as honest and straightforward as when it was a very directed and smooth examination. I came out of the gate with something that was off script. Tell me about Pamela Erickson. Tell me about Christine. Tell me about Crystal. Because she's the one that said cheating to her meant pornography. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know, she knew exactly who those people were, and that she believed that he was cheating on them with her. And apparently she is too, with some guy named Ben. That when I describe this as a violent, nonsensical relationship, that's exactly what it is. It's not to downplay the violence. She got stabbed. She had minor surgery. It got infected. Those injuries are real. But they just don't apply in this case. They just don't apply when you use that self-defense instruction when she's the aggressor, if it's to be believed.
Approach.
It doesn't fit. Oh my God. Yeah, it just this doesn't make a lot of sense of what they got going on. and he's only getting started. Her nose looks super red. I'm guessing from anger, I don't see her as the crying in public type. Not that we can control it. I just feel like she would rather not if she had the choice. So, hang on.
Objections overruled.
Let me say it loud and clear. Battered spouse syndrome does not have any effect on this case. It has no relationship to this case because she is the aggressor. She zipped him shut in the suitcase. After he said, I couldn't breathe, she wouldn't let him out. Therefore, all of the instructions above that paragraph of however do not apply. They do not apply. Now, turning back to what I was saying, did the witness have some interest in how the case would be decided? Well, of course. 3 out of 4 panels that y'all came from indicated to the judge fear of punishment was more important than the fear of public speaking. It speaks for itself. She has an interest in the outcome of the case. Now let's talk about, does her testimony agree with the other evidence in the case? You do not have to accept this story. Let's pretend, as you should, because all 6 of these things, we haven't gotten to the inconsistent statements. Let's pretend her testimony doesn't exist, and you just have to look at the circumstances.
I've always asked that, Kimberly. It made no sense.
The testimony from the defendant is George Torres' head is here. You can stand if you need. You've been sitting a long time too. His head is here. His butt is kind of down here. His feet are here. And his hands and his knees are up here. He's in the fetal position, if we remember right. The hematoma on his head is on the left side. The bruises, the deep bruises on his back are on his left side. That's, you hear that? That's solid. You don't have to accept that she put those marks on him when he was in there. The evidence doesn't support it. You can conclude she used his bat when he was outside the suitcase. You don't have to believe her when she said they were playing hide and seek. You don't have to believe her because she doesn't know the rules. She came downstairs, saw what she had done, and had all the opportunity in the world to clean up whatever mess may have been at the bottom of the stairs. But ladies and gentlemen, physics doesn't lie. She can't expect you to believe her testimony about the loud boom being the day before compared to her 2 neighbors who weren't drinking, who have no interest in the outcome of the case, who suffer from none of the infirmities of her testimony. She suffers from all 6 infirmities. When her neighbors say there was a loud boom that night, there was a loud boom that night. Did it shake the wall they shared in common? It shook the wall that they shared in common. Did she have any injuries consistent with being dragged up and down the stairs the night before? No. You saw the pictures the CSI took. You don't have to accept her story about hide and seek. Something made that loud boom. It takes energy to make a loud boom. Energy that could very well be in the form of somebody going down some of the stairs, all the stairs, in the suitcase, out of the suitcase. But that's what the evidence supports, is there was a loud boom that shook the walls and interrupted a FaceTime conversation that was so loud that the girlfriend on the other end heard it. Something loud happened. And then there was silence, according to the witnesses. And they can argue that Juan Torres' testimony was great for them. It's great for the state. She was screaming at him already at 7:30 p.m. She was already on her bully pulpit. And we know she doesn't need to put him into the coffin to get on her bully pulpit. There's video after video of her on her bully pulpit telling him how it's going to be, how you're going to live your life. Go take a walk. Do this. Do that. You don't have to accept anything she said. It's inconsistent that he received the hematoma to his head, his bloody mouth. How is his mouth getting bloodied inside the suitcase? That's protected from her and her bat. But that suitcase, a 100-pound drunk woman is not beating through the wood of that suitcase or whatever it is that's making that noise when it's thumped. Ladies and gentlemen, those injuries happened outside of the suitcase. Ladies and gentlemen, somebody or something went down those stairs. She has no injuries consistent with going down the stairs. He does. He has blunt force trauma all over him. You don't have to buy her story, and you shouldn't. The inconsistencies, I'm not going to belabor it. Your dinner is waiting in back. Let's just briefly talk about the experts, and we'll move on to the end.
So gangster.
Dr. Brandon is absolutely fantastic. He explained everything that you all needed to know about battered spouse syndrome. And this isn't about whether one of them or both of them have battered spouses. At the end of the day, she's the initial aggressor, and she had the duty to do the things that the law requires. But it does call into question the credibility of the past power dynamics of their relationship. Those videos speak for themselves. The officer in the last video asked him, dude, you're a guy. Why don't you do something about this woman, your wifey, who you don't want to rat on for beating you? He said, man, I'm not a beefcake. I'm not going to rat her out. There's countless examples if you apply Dr. Brandon's testimony to Juan Torres that really shows you the power dynamics of the relationship. He was her violent pet. Dr. Harper, I don't find much quarrel with what she says about battered spouse syndrome, and nobody should. I mean, she's the expert, but she's not Ms. Boone's treating physician. She's not her treating psychologist. The way it was described in argument, and I believe from Dr. Brandon's testimony, was she's supposed to be a forensic detective. Get to the bottom of this. She's going to come in here at trial and tell you her opinion you should rely upon. With 9 visits, she never asked the defendant what it is the victim said that put you in imminent fear of death or great bodily harm. That's the crux of the matter, Doc. You're never going to ask her what it is he said or did for this grand jury instruction about threat of force or use of force. It's remarkable. And, she didn't review everything that was presented to you. At the end of the day, it's your opinion that matters about this relationship. And again, we agree with Dr. Werner. It doesn't matter. She had the duty to retreat. She had the duty to take the chokehold off. And if it was too dangerous for her to directly take the chokehold off, she had the duty to do something else, everything in her power to stop him from dying because she started it. She set it in motion. She used the force grip on him from a distance, the couch and from bed. It was her obligation to stop. She didn't. But Dr. Werner, she was called by the state of Florida after having evaluated and listened to the defendant give a similar story and concluded battered spouse doesn't apply. So she was never asked to delve any deeper into it. Given the information that she did have, the limited information, she agrees, yes, Ms. Boone has battered spouse syndrome, but it doesn't apply to the case because she was the aggressor and she did not fulfill her obligations. And really just your gut common sense. Go back to jury selection. In jury selection, there was examples about bullies day after day doing something to somebody. And somebody raised their hand and said, don't they have to do something that day? Don't they have to do something that day? And he didn't. After he was put in fear of death and told her he can't breathe, the imminent threat of great bodily harm and death she is describing to you is him fighting for his life to escape.
He also had, condo dough? He also had a busted lip and an abrasion on the side of his mouth. So it was a little more than just the suffocation. There was actual blunt force trauma on his face about the mouth.
Escape. She did not fulfill her obligations. There's details that matter. Again, not to belabor it. I mean, the evidence in the body-worn camera and the 911 calls, it's not offered to prove the truth of the matter of as who stated what. Who knows what happened between these two? You see them with the police. Can't believe anything they're saying. It's not offered to prove that she's a bad person. It's not offered to prove that Mr. Torres is a bad person. It's simply offered to call in question the reliability and credibility of what she said about the past. That's all that it's there for. But there are some nuggets and some Easter eggs. There was an argument made during closings that Mr. Torres knows not to do anything when being videotaped. Bizarrely, shortly thereafter, they showed a very edited clip of him attacking her and slapping the phone out of her hand. He knows he was being videotaped, and there was another video like it too. So to make the argument that he doesn't do anything, he's a good boy when he's being videotaped, it's belied by their own argument. They showed one of the videos. Learned helplessness. She seemed to control everything. I mean, his birth certificate, it gets torn up when he doesn't comply with her wishes. You'll see the rest of the text messages if you choose to delve into them. But I would suggest you don't have to, given the jury instruction about aggressor. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a long 2 weeks, and you are making a very, very important decision for Ms. Boone, and a very, very important decision for Mr. Torres in the state of Florida and his family. He's dead. She killed him. She's admitting she killed him to have this affirmative defense if I was justified. It was not justified under our law. She does not get to decide that she has a license to kill because of her past grievances. The law requires her to stop using the force that she started applying to him. And she didn't. She didn't withdraw. She didn't tell him he was withdrawing. She didn't use every means available to try and stop this from happening. She didn't. And you know what was in her heart. She tells you it's hatred, ill will, spite, and venom. This is not a self-defense case under the law. Go back and follow the law. You cannot feel sorry for her. You cannot feel sorry for him. You cannot feel angry at her. You cannot feel angry at him. It's maddening to see their relationship. It is maddening. Nobody would want this life for yourselves or your children. It is violent nonsense, but it does not affect what she did and what her duties were under the law that night. She wanted to punish him. She did, and then she left him there. And she had an obligation, if you even believe her story about the imminent threat for him fighting for his life, she had an obligation to do something about it and not just go upstairs and let him suffocate. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. It is Thanksgiving week and court does not stop. It is only closed on Thursday. So we are here. It's November 26th and we are going live into court in Massachusetts because Karen Reed and her lawyers are back in court on discovery motions. So I feel like the only thing I should say is here
I'm here. Sorry about that. I'm trying to switch it.
You answer?
State, do you recognize our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you recognize our jury? Right. Members of the jury, you may be seated. Thank you. Members of our jury, good evening. I understand that you've come to a verdict in this case.
Yes.
If you could please hand the verdict form to the deputy, please. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, if you could please publish the verdict.
Watch her breathing.
Case number 2603, the state of Florida versus Sarah Boone. Verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree as charged in the information. So say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 25th day of October 2024.
See how her breathing got really shallow?
Madam Clerk, please poll our jury.
Juror seat number 1, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes, it is.
Juror seat number 2, is this your true and correct verdict? Yes, it is. Juror seat number 3, is this your true and correct verdict? Juror seat number 4, is this your true and correct
Number 3.
Juror seat number 5, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror seat number 6, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
Members of our jury, again, I want to thank you for your time, your sacrifice, and your attention in this matter. I know that we spent almost 2 weeks together and it was not taken lightly, and I really appreciate the time and the effort and the sacrifice that you put into this case. I want to advise you now of your final instruction. Members, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for your time and your consideration in this case. I also wish to advise you of some very special privileges enjoyed by jurors. No juror can ever be required to talk about the discussions that occurred in the jury room except by court order. For many centuries, our society has relied upon juries for consideration of difficult cases. We have recognized for hundreds of years that a jury's deliberations, discussions, and votes should remain their private.
I'm gonna turn. I just want to look at her as it sinks in. And then it was interesting because when everybody gets up, it's a little bit. I hate to use the word sad, but she's a human being. It's a little. It feels deserted. I'm sure she felt abandoned at that moment. We are not. I was going to do sentencing, but Sugar Bear has woken up, and I have it all queued up, but I don't want to have another error and send you guys into EDV or something else again. So we're gonna call it a night. We had good sound. We had a good run. Let's not play with fate. Yeah. Shout out to number 2. He offers her no comforting words, or it doesn't look like he doesn't reach over, or it just is all very matter of fact. But what did she expect, guys? Do you know? What did she really expect was going to happen? That they were gonna send her home? Atta girl. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me. Happy New Year. California Pacific time. You're in my heart. It's my home state, but we're not gonna make it to wish you Happy New Year. So, Happy New Year to you now early. Thanks, everybody. Bama, thinking of you, lifting you up from afar. I know you're gone, but in case you watch this again later. All right, Yana, Northwest, all the regular crew. If I didn't say your name, put it on the head, not the heart. I will talk to you all later. Toodles.